Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question earlier was that why is it that the budget for health would appear to be less in 2022 than in 2021? And the response was that is because of the Mandanas ruling. Okay? Now, we are in the middle of a pandemic. I think our spending on health should be increasing, both at the local and at the national level. Surely the local governments who have little resources, like for example, in next year's budget in 2022, as presented, the allocation for LGs is only 21% of the entire national budget. Meaning to say 80% will remain with the national government. Okay? Now, it is difficult to think that we are reducing our spending on health. Okay? Now, how are we insofar as we discussed the vaccination program, no? And before I leave this issue, there is also a budget next year under a program for booster shots. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Would that be
Mr. Chairman.
sufficient? Considering that we have not allocated for possibly increasing the number of people that need to be inoculated, particularly those below 18, hindi ba dapat dagdagan pa natin yung pondo for vaccines next year, not only booster shots, but it would appear that we might need to provide vaccines to those below 18, 12 to 18, to hit 90% of our population, as mentioned by Secretary Carl Chua.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yusek, please.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, when the budget was prepared way back in April or May, there was no discussion at that time, no, regarding the Delta variant, regarding inoculating our citizens 18 years old and below. And that's the reason why, based on the submission of DOH, there was only a provision for the booster shot, which at that time, as was mentioned, no, during the time I recall, the science was still being done on that issue.
I get the point, Yusek Tina. No?
So far as the provision that we gave, it was equivalent to 115.9 doses, 115.9 million doses. And it was funded under the 2021 budget, amounting to, I think, 76 billion plus 61 billion under foreign assisted projects. So the funding for the doses at that time, given the information we had, was limited to that amount. However, with this new information, then certain adjustments, we admit, must be done to the Department of Health.
And how much should that be, those adjustments?
At the moment, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, we don't have any data coming from the OH, how much this will entail.
Okay, and that's why
we're permission of Senator Ralph. Yusek Tina, what have we budgeted for in 2022? Is it the 2 shots plus a booster, or just the booster?
Just the booster, Mr. Chairman.
Just the booster,
because
okay.
We already
and how much do we have for that? How much do we have for that booster?
46.
For the booster, it is under the unprogrammed fund, and it's around 45 billion pesos, Your Honor,
Mr.
Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ralph.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ralph, just 1.30
yes, please, Vice Chair Joel. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. No, I was looking at the budget, and it's correct. It's 45.7 billion under unprogrammed appropriations. But let me also point out, just to strengthen the position of our Senate President Pro Tem, the original proposal of DOH is 104 billion for this booster vaccine booster, Mr. Chairman. But again, the one listed right now is 45.7 billion. So we hope that we'll be able to, perhaps, I don't know if it is still a good idea to put it under the unprogrammed appropriations, because we all know that only if the government has surplus revenues from the collection of taxes, dun lang ma-access yan. No? So Yun po, gusto ko lang Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Ralph.
Salamat. Go ahead, Senator Ralph. Thank you, Senator Vice Chair Joel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so let me continue, Mr. President. So there will be a need to increase the budget again for vaccines next year, no? Be it for boosters and to increase the number of people that need to be vaccinated. Okay. More so because of the Delta variant, as mentioned earlier. Are there adequate resources also? For example, because the budget for next year, as I mentioned earlier, will be less Department of Health, no, compared to this year. So, how much do we intend to spend for testing, for example, next year? I'm
I
sorry.
think you're on mute,
Secretary, can-
Yusek Tina, you're on mute.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, we don't have data specific to testing with regards to the DOH budget. I don't have it with me at the moment, but we can provide the committee.
Do any of our secretaries have the figures for testing, Your Honor? Secretary Carl or Secretary Sani or or anyone in the DBM? Would you have those figures? I see Secretary Carl shaking his head. So we'll request that Secretary Ralph from them.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. While we're at it, so testing, contact tracing, is there a budget for contact tracing next year?
Contact
Anybody could
tracing,
answer? Anybody who knows?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, contact tracing is under the DILG, although a small percentage of that is also with DOH. But mainly the contact tracers are under the coverage of the DILG.
Yes. So is there a budget for next year?
For this year, I'm sure there is, but for next year, I'm not sure whether there is an amount. I will look, Your Honor. I think there is no budget for contact tracing for the DILG next year.
Okay. And the reason why we bring this up is because we all know that we need to do this now that we are not vaccinating as many people as possible, not because of supply issues. So what needs to be done is to test, contact trace, and to treat, isolate, and treat. No? Okay. In the budget of the Department of Health, do we have adequate resources to purchase medicines needed by COVID patients?
Mr. Chair, there is no breakdown in the DOH budget regarding specifically for COVID patients. It's lumped under medicine and other supplies and materials.
Okay, so we don't know too. How much are we going to be spending for treating COVID patients?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Chair, I think it will be the DOH which is in a proper position to answer that specific question.
Yeah. Remember, we are in a pandemic, huh? And these are very basic in addressing the pandemic, no? So let me move on, Mr. President, no? We know that there have been hearings in the Senate, and there have been many complaints by our health workers with regard to their benefits. Okay? Now, for next year's budget, have we already appropriated the necessary benefits to be given to our health workers?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Your Honor, if Senator Recto is referring to the SRA, then it is not. But for hazard pay, it is because it is part of the salaries of our healthcare workers. For MAT, which is meals, allowances, and transportation, this is supposed to be charged against the regular budget of the agency.
So it is incomplete. We do not have adequate resources to provide our health workers next year.
For SRA, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, there are no sources in the budget at the moment for that specific allowance.
And how much will be needed?
I understand based on the computation of DOH, and this has not been verified because the number of healthcare workers have not been specified, but I understand roughly they're estimating 52 billion pesos
Will
for
be
this
needed
purpose,
for
Your Honor.
next year. Okay, so
52
yun ang
billion,
kulang.
yes.
Okay, I'm sure that
Para
the
sa ano ulit
chairman-
yun, Yusek Tina, yung 52? For what
52
purpose?
billion.
For
Hindi pa po
SRA?
namin
Is that
nako-compute
just for
yung-
SRA?
Yes, that is for SRA, Your Honor.
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
thank you.
Okay, SRA lang yan. What about other benefits due to healthcare workers aside from the SRA?
The MAT, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, Senator Recto, the MAT is supposed to be for a 6-month period based on their submission, 32 billion pesos. But then again, we're not sure because they use this is a potential claim. I think there should be a lower and higher number where you compute how many actually of the healthcare workers will be entitled to the MAT.
Okay, and incidentally, magkano ba talaga yung SRA na yan? How
Ang
much is it?
maximum, Mr. Chairman, may I proceed?
Yeah.
The maximum of the SRA is 5,000 per healthcare worker per month. But there are categories no, which DOH policy has determined. So hindi po equivalent to 5,000 flat amount yung
It could be
SRA.
lower.
Yes, in all probability it might be lower.
On the average, how much is it? 3,000?
We are not sure, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman. What we do is whatever DOH submits to us times the number of healthcare workers we provide.
Okay.
So
So,
it is,
just for our
DOH
understanding, just for our understanding, pinag-uusapan lang natin dito 3,000 o 5,000
Opo, Mr. Chair.
for our nurses and for our doctors. Is that correct?
Healthcare workers who are exposed directly. So there is a distinction pa po dahil hindi po lahat ng healthcare workers natin ma-entitle sa SRA. Because under the bayanihan,
I
ang
understand that.
nakalagay po yan.
Yusek Dina, yeah, we discussed that, no? And we can now amend that in the budget.
Yes po.
Okay? To include all. Okay? So, but the point is this, we're talking about our doctors, our nurses, at ang pinag-uusapan lang natin dito, 3,000 piso isang buwan hanggang 5. Buhay nila yung nakataya. So, napakaliit na halaga lang nito, kung tutusin natin, and we're talking of a 5 trillion budget. And we're spending less on health next year than on this year. Okay, so that's the point I just wanted to bring out as well, no? Okay, in the scheme of things, magkano ba lang talaga pinag-uusapan dito, no? Okay, and isn't there a need to increase the hiring of healthcare workers for our hospitals? Don't we
Yes,
have
Your
an increase
Honor.
in budget next year for this purpose?
Mr. Chair, may I respond?
Yes.
The DOH, I think, has difficulty actually hiring at this point because it's not really a question of providing them positions for healthcare workers. At present, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 14,000 personnel of the DOH remains vacant from their staffing pattern. It is really, one, their qualification standards, and number two, there are no applicants for positions of healthcare workers, or we are not producing enough of them at the moment, Your Honor.
Hindi ba kaya because also napakababa ng sweldo ng health workers natin?
Mr. Chairman, may I say something? Yeah.
With the indulgence.
With the indulgence of our Speaker pro tempore, Ralph Recto.
Yes,
I
please.
just want to contribute to that kasi yung aming hospital dito sa Las Piñas is having a hard time hiring people. And meron din kaming private company na naka-line up naman yung mga gustong magtrabaho. Siguro the problem is the pay. Kasi we're paying well and they are not paying well. But at this point, kailangan kahit na job order, lakihan natin para ma-attract natin yung mga healthcare worker. Kasi they have to pay paid more because they're taking a big risk when they become health worker now because the chances of being contaminated is very high. So, tingin ko it's the pay. Oo, kasi sila walang mag-apply sa kanila. Sa amin nakapila yung nag-a-apply. So,
Yes.
what's the difference? I think it's the
Thank
pay.
I agree totally.
Senator Kiko.
That's why we're
Senator
bringing
Kiko,
this
yes.
out.
With the
Yes.
permission of the chair and Senator Recto.
Yes, with the permission, Senator Recto.
Yes,
Senator
very
Kiko.
quickly. Yes, it is the pay, but at the same time, it is also the timely release. Mababa na nga yung pay, hindi pa nare-release. Talagang wala nang magkaka-interest sa ganyang klaseng sitwasyon. For the record, Mr. President.
Thank you. Very good points. And if I, again, with the permission, Senator Ralph, Yusek Tina, can you check on the vacant positions at the DOH? Because I was told there are 30,000. This came out during the hearing. There are 30,000 vacant positions with the DOH, and yet there are like 13,000 or over 13,000 contractuals. So can we try to address that situation? Because the DBM, the Congress cannot provide for positions, but the DBM can.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Senator Ralph.
Chairman, yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Joel, Vice Chair Joel, with the permission again
I'm
of
sure-
Senator Ralph.
I just wanted to give you the exact figures, Mr. Chairman, and it's unfortunate that we have been raising this particular issue every single year. In fact, since 2018, 2019, up to this year, Mr. Chairman, the difference of not being filled in the positions of the office of the secretary and the entire DOH. In 2018, it's 14,278. 2019, 13,058. 2020, 14,005. And 2021, 14,241. Imagine, Mr. Chairman, if we are filling this up, Mr. Chairman, these positions in the DOH. And we have been talking about this since time immemorial, and I think the records will bear me out. Just to point that out, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for following it up. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you to Senator Joel. That's been your issue with the contractualization and full-time employment. Thank you. Back to you, Senator Ralph. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me move on, Mr. I'm sure that the committee and our colleagues in the Senate would look kindly on increasing the budget for the DOH, particularly for our health workers, so on and so forth, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. So let me continue. I asked the issue on medicines earlier, no, because maraming naghahanap ng gamot to treat COVID patients at parang kulang na kulang din, no? And I know that there was a response earlier that they will get back to us on this data. But let me move on. Our new strategy today is, well, we all know that cases are increasing, okay? And we've adopted a new strategy for granular lockdowns, if I'm not mistaken, no? Okay. Meron na rin ba tayo, let's say, for next year na nakahanda na pag nag-lockdown may pang-ayuda?
Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, no, we don't have any specific item in the budget that provides that kind of potential claim against the budget.
Yes. This year, how much did we allocate para sa ayuda?
We did not provide, Mr. Chairman, we did not provide any specific line item for ayuda that was
This year.
granted to the.
Correct. But we did give ayuda, right? It came from where?
It came from number one, the first funding source would be the 13.9, I think, or 13.2. I'm not sure about yung apelido, pero 13 billion came from generated savings as mandated under AO 41 signed by the President. And this corresponds to the 2020 appropriations, which will no longer be utilized. That's the bulk, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. And then subsequently, we released it from the remainder of the unprogrammed funds, which at that time we had a cash backup to support. So
Yeah.
that's the funding source for the NCR Plus and Laguna and Bataan.
Okay. Shouldn't we provide for a budget also for lockdowns, konting ayuda?
Mr. Chairman, yes, Mr. Chairman, we would love that, but unfortunately, under our current system, it discourages lump sum funds for for no reason. So that's the reason why we don't have any amount provided for ayuda and lockdowns, because we cannot foresee how much would be required.
Yeah,
Hindi
yeah.
ba pwede sa contingent fund yun, Yusek Tina?
Yes. Correct.
Pwede naman po, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, but then we will be increasing the contingent fund and then we will have to defend it in case that that happens. But
But that is the biggest, I think Senator Ralph's point is that's the biggest contingency of all, well, upon which everything is dependent upon.
Correct.
yes, the committee can actually augment.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Parang two different budgets yung pre-Delta and post-Delta yung
Correct.
gagawin natin.
Correct.
Totally different worlds.
Correct. And that's why we're bringing this to the attention of the committee, no? Because
Thank you very much, Senator Ralph.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the responses also. And next year, the budget will roughly increase by about what? 500 billion? We will be about 5 trillion, no? Next year.
Yeah.
Okay. How much have we disbursed this year?
Disbursements, Your Honor, we only have obligations at this point. The disbursements are still moving, but approximately
still moving, yes.
we see yes, sir. Your Honor, if I'm not mistaken, percentage-wise, it's around 30% disbursement as of
Correct. More or less.
July. Yeah.
Correct. So, is the government affected also? Our spending ability, isn't it affected because of the pandemic? Our productivity, in that sense, is also affected by the pandemic, isn't it?
I think, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, I think it would be NEDA Secretary Carl who can best answer this in terms of the statistics of the difficulty we're having in implementation.
And
Go
that's
ahead,
why
Secretary
also
Carl.
second quarter growth, government consumption is down. Because we have not been able to spend the budget on time as well. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Chair, on government spending, the consumption is down because of the very high consumption base last year when we did Bayanihan 1. So that is why it's negative. But on the
Yeah, I understand that.
construction, it is
Secretary
still
Carl.
positive.
Yeah, Secretary Carl, yes, I understand that, no? I could also say the reason why we grew 11% is because we had a low base last year. Okay, but the point is this, Secretary Carl, the disbursement is only 30%. And that's why government consumption could have been better. The economy could have grown faster, right? And what is the biggest increase in the budget for next year? We know that the health department is down. Spending on health is down. Which is the biggest increase in the budget next year? Secretary Carla.
I think DBM might be able to answer more accurately.
Yeah.
PM, who wants to shoot the ball here?
Mr. Chairman, as to the figures for disbursements, which Senator Ralph would like to know, based on BTR figures, I think we have 2.583 trillion as of June ba yan? July? July 31. I
Yes, so
don't have
what is the biggest increase in the budget for 2022?
Mr. Chair, I did
What
not
is the
hear.
biggest increase? Which department gets the biggest increase next year?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I will have to look at my data for the moment.
Can you show on the screen yung sa ano natin? Okay, so anyway, let me move on, no? So disbursements are 30% more or less. Here we are talking about a bigger budget, and I agree, no? Okay sana, no? And our deficit will roughly be 1.8, almost a little less than 2 trillion next year. Okay? And yet we cannot spend the budget. That is the point. And we are not spending enough on health. during a pandemic. That is the point that I'm trying to drive at, Mr. President. No? There seems to be a misplaced priority in that sense. Now, if, for example, the national government agencies, and particularly build is a major issue, and we're ramping up spending on capital outlay, but isn't it that it is also the departments with huge capital outlays that have the lowest disbursement?
Mr. Chairman, yes, effectively, the infrastructure agencies really have a slow disbursement curve because of the nature of their activity. Yes, Your Honor, you are correct.
Now, I think some of them may be at fault, these infrastructure departments, but not all of them. Because we are told also that the DBM has not released allotments to these departments. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Chair, Your Honor, there is a specific provision in the veto message where it states that new items, meaning these are items not considered in the NEP, which are considered new, this would require a review from the Office of the President. So as a result, we referred it to the Office of the President for their review and approval. I think for DPWH alone, this is 140 billion plus. And to date, I think we already released 33 billion pesos based on approvals provided by the Office of the President, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. It is this item of the veto message which actually made it slower in terms of new projects. But in terms of ongoing huge infrastructure projects, we have released it comprehensively. And in fact, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, we released almost 85% of allotments to government agencies. This has been released comprehensively.
Yes. And the reason why I bring this out, like again, which I said earlier, no, we're spending too little on health. We're increasing the budget for these departments, which I support. Okay, but the problem is in the implementation, and that's why your second growth this quarter has been low. Okay, and government consumption has dipped. Okay, and that also explains why it is difficult to have this economic recovery and create jobs in the process. Part of the presentation earlier of DEDA was unemployment, underemployment, so on and so forth. Diba? So I just wanted to flag that as well in the committee so that we could respond to some of these issues at the appropriate time, because we need to prepare for an economic recovery as well down the road, no? Hopefully next year.
Yes.
That's,
Mr. Chair, Mr.
It's a very
Chairman.
good point by our Senate President Pro Temp, and I'd like to inform him that he has one more question. His time is up, but I'll give him time to ask one more question.
Yeah, just a follow-up on that statement of our Senate President Pro Tempore with the permission of
Yes,
the
my
Senate. So this is a very valid point raised by Senator Recto. How do we intend to address this? I have not heard the DBCC address this very critical issue. We keep on budgeting, but the disbursement is a challenge, and therefore, you know, the contribution of government spending in the gross national product (GDP) is not to the level that we want it to be. And while I have the floor, you know, even if the obligation rate is also, I suspect, very low, and this is made worse by the fact that when an item in the budget is assigned to PSDBM or to PITC, that is considered obligated, and yet it is not disbursed. And that is where a lot of funds are being parked in these agencies, and that also affects our disbursement because these are not small amounts. So how do we intend to address this with the provision of Senator Ralph? May we know how, if this is a valid observation of Senator Ralph, how do we propose to address this? Thank you, Senator Ralph.
Total. Mr. Chairman.
Yung 30% na binanggit mo kanina, is that the disbursement rate or the obligation rate?
That is the
Mr.
disbursement rate.
Chairman, that's disbursement rate.
Disbursement, okay.
Yes,
All right.
Let me add, that disbursement rate, incidentally, to complete the picture, does not necessarily mean only for last year's budget, but it also includes the automatic
years.
appropriation for prior years.
Yes.
Right, that's right.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, for obligation rates, Senator Drilon is correct that he's not correct as far as PS is concerned, but he is correct insofar as the obligation rates. It however hovers at around 75% for current year's levels, but this is really not an ideal ratio at this point of 75%. It should be a little, it should be higher, around 85 to 90% ang obligation rates. So 75% po ang obligation rates, and then we have a disbursement rate, which is a direct factor of implementation at 38. So that's how the discrepancy.
75% is the average obligation rate per agency?
75%, Mr. Chair.
What is that exactly?
How much is it?
What is the 75%? What does it represent, Yusek Tina,
This is the obligation rates, Your Honor.
2020?
75% po ang
Yes,
obligation
for what?
rate.
For what year? What period? What
2021, Your Honor, as of June 2021.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, is the disbursement rate of 30% of the national budget or 30% of the disbursement rate?
30% disbursement rate of the obligation, Your Honor.
Okay, so
It's even lower if it's of the budget.
It's 30% of the obligation rate.
Not of the appropriations. Appropriations here, yes.
So this Gada budget is a fiction in terms of its role in our national development. It's almost
So you
a
said, what is
fiction.
the figure for over appropriations? Disbursement over appropriations. What is the figure?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what is the figure, since you mentioned that the 30% is disbursement over the obligated amount? If you're
Yes,
taking the base as the appropriations, what is the disbursement rate?
Please,
Wag
Your
naman
Honor.
15%.
Chairman, asan dito?
15 to 20% na lang yan, actually, San Kiko.
2.6 ang total allotment ng
Mr. Chairman, ang total allotments released is around 2.3 trillion, and then the disbursements would amount to, pakiclick na, hindi ko makita eh. Disbursements, teka lang Mr. Chairman kasi medyo maliit po.
Yeah, sige, we'll just move on along to
Sige
facilitate.
po.
Just submit it na lang.
Yes,
to us.
Mr. Chair,
Just to put it in perspective, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just one. In other words, on the basis of the statements of the Department of Budget and Management, just to put it in a more understandable form, for every 1,000 pesos that we budget, only 750 pesos is obligated. And of the 750 pesos, only 30% is disbursed. So for every 1,000 pesos that we allocate in the budget, only 225, more or less, is disbursed.
Thank you.
Is that the
Thank you,
correct?
Minority Leader.
Yeah.
That's a useful. Yeah,
Mr.
Senator
Chair?
Nancy Binay was raising her hand.
With the permission of Senator Recto,
Hindi yun reflected.
can I proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Please go
Yeah,
ahead. But
Hindi,
yeah.
which means, just to add dun sa point ng ating minority floor leader, on the ground, ang ibig sabihin nito, yung kalsada na dapat gagamitin na natin by December, well, technically, hindi pa siya nauumpisahan kasi yung pondo is still with DBM. That is the effect on the ground. Yung tulay, yung farm to market road na dapat na nagbe-benefit na yung mga farmers natin, hindi nila nagagamit ito.
Or halimbawa, yung public market na nasira dahil sa pagputok ng bulkan ng Taal na dapat ipagawa, hindi pa rin pinagagawa.
Correct, Senator Ralph. So at the end of the day, there's no recovery.
Nasa lipa ako at bumabagyo ngayon.
Which means, Mr. Chairman, on the ground, there's no recovery happening. Kung ganyan yung scenario.
It's slower than intended by Congress, Your Honors. I think that's the point. And we have to ask the executive to somehow help the country by, as raised by Senator Ralph, to speed up the, also the minority leader and Senator Nancy, to speed up the expenditures. Baka this FLR has had some unintended consequences. Dahil alam ko yung intention ng FLR is really to vet the projects to make sure they're good projects, but at the end of the day, we might be taking too long. Because the idea is that in a pandemic, you do stimulus spending. The government provides the economic stimulus. Yung vacuum provided by the private sector demand shrinking is taken up, the slack is taken up by the public sector, but apparently that may not be happening. Tama ba, Sen. Ralph? I think.
That is correct. Not only that, but also to provide hope. Isipin nyo, if we are to hire health workers and give them decent pay, na nakikiisa tayo sa paghihirap nila, at bigyan natin ng magandang ayuda pag nag-lockdown yung mga tao, that will stimulate spending also.
Yeah. Sen. Cynthia and Sen. Risa are raising their hand with the permission of Senator Ralph again.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, last point na lang.
Vice Chair.
And just to clarify, tama ba yung narinig ko na it's not even more than 50%?
No.
Kasi
What is not
33
more
billion.
than 50%?
Kasi parang na-mention ni Yusek Tina, parang 33 pa lang. And the
That's
rest
the disbursed,
is,
yes.
yeah,
That's
and
the
the rest,
disbursed is 30+%.
and the rest is still pending in Malacanang.
No.
What is that amount na hindi pa
No.
nare-release kasi subject to clearance from Malacanang?
Based on the figure given by Yusek Tina, she mentioned about 140 for FLR and about 33 released. So there's about a little over 100 billion still for later release. And sana yun somehow mapabilis. Can we recognize Vice Chair Cynthia Villar after Vice Chair Risa?
Yeah, maybe we should ask this question from the head of the department kasi it's unfair to them. Baka may mga department na mabagal, may department na mabilis. Gina-generalize natin. I think the DBM, considering that she's new in the job, baka hindi naman niya alam kung anong department yung kasi ako, parang sa amin sa public works, hindi kami nahuhuli yung mga ginagawa ko dito. So maybe we should be asking these details from the department. Maybe we should ask from the Department of Health and maybe we should ask from the Department of Public Works and Highways. Kasi I don't think the DBM is familiar with what they're all doing. Oo. So we should not, parang mag-aano na tayo. Kasi supposed to be, itong detalyeng to, we asked the head of the department for this during our budget hearing. Hindi sa kanila.
That's a good point. We'll do that, Vice Chair Cynthia. Yeah.
And I think yung reason for the later release kasi kaya sila nag-later release kasi kokonti ang puwera ng gobyerno eh. Oo, kasi di ba nag-suffer ang collection. I don't think the government has enough money for all of this. Dinadahan-dahan din nila kasi during the pandemic talagang lumiit ang income ng government, I think. Oo, kasi mas marami ang hindi nagbabayad ng taxes kasi nalulugi sila. So, I think it's a combination of factor. Kaya nagyari yung practice na later release kasi dinadahan-dahan din nila yung release ng funds kasi wala ring ganung fund na kalaki ang government. Parang nag-iintay din nila ng income to release. I think that's the reason. One of the reason.
Yeah.
I don't know if
That's
it's the whole reason. So
That's a good point also, Vice Chair Cynthia. Thank you for raising that. And I'm sure our colleagues will raise the obligation and disbursement rates at the agency levels when we hear the respective budgets also. So, Vice Chair Risa, then finally we'll ask Senator Ralph to wrap up. Thank you, Vice Chair Risa. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and salamat din kay Sen. Ralph. I'm also glad that the Chair brought up the matter of the FLR funds because when my turn comes to interpolate the DBCC briefing, I really would like to raise some points about that issue, especially to DBM, in relation to how those FLR funds might be related to the adjustments to the current proposed budget na binanggit kanina ni Yusek Tanda. Adjustments especially in terms of the risk allowances for healthcare workers, adjustments in relation to yung budgets for the third vaccine, sa third vaccine dose, adjustments para sa budget for contact tracing, and a few others, Mr. Chairman, that are kapag nakakagulat, wala sa current proposed budget natin. So salamat, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Risa. Then we'll go now to back to our Senate President Pro Tem, Senator Ralph. Sir, you have one more question left. Your time is already up. You're on mute, sir. You're on mute, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. I do not wish to, I have more questions, but I leave it up to our colleagues to ask their own questions, and maybe at the appropriate time, maybe tomorrow, we can continue with the propounding questions to our resource persons. But let me make a manifestation, no? With regard to the ability of the Department of Finance to be able to manage our finances, our debt, I have no doubt that the Department of Finance is very capable in managing our debt, in managing our finances. The problem lies more, as far as I'm concerned, with regard to the disbursement, the ability of government to be able to spend these resources, more so today during this pandemic, no, and allocation of these very limited resources, Mr. President, no? And that's where Congress comes in. Okay? Kung ano yung kulang na sinabit ng executive, inaayos lang natin, no? Because we have more time to discuss it also. And some of those examples I brought out earlier, so that at the appropriate time, we can make the adjustments to the budget. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to our resource persons.
Thank you always for the very perceptive and important questions for Senate President Pro Tem. Next is our very serious-looking Majority Leader. Now, Majority Leader Biggs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Very serious looking because I was in the other hearing for the commissioner appointments. There was an issue on hazing, and you all know that I'm the principal author of the new together with Senator Sani and Senator Joel, and many of our colleagues here, the improved anti-hazing law or the enhanced anti-hazing law. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask our resource persons just a few things. Number one, we discussed it already earlier with the Minority Floor Leader. I'm glad that he raised that issue on the renationalization of certain bills. Because as your Majority Floor Leader and as a member of the Senate, we're tackling a lot of measures now that will need funding. And I want to, of course, reiterate fiscal responsibility, that we have to also have fiscal responsibility as a legislation. And I can see Tito Sani Dominguez, I call him Tito because I'm close to his son, and he has seen me in short pants. And I can see him nodding. We have to be fiscally responsible also as a co-equal branch of government. And I'm glad that he answered already that very carefully, very clearly, that with the Mandanas ruling, and correct me if I'm wrong, Secretary Dominguez, with the Mandanas ruling, the funds that we will have for national government projects and programs will be very limited. And so therefore, if we renationalize many institutions that are already being funded by local government, you will eat into a very small pie. Is that correct to point out, Secretary Dominguez? Would that be correct to assume that we'll be eating in a smaller pie?
Definitely, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, definitely the national government's share is going to go down. So the pie, in effect, for the national government is going to go down. However, the principle behind the government's action regarding the Mandanas ruling is if the LGUs are going to get more money, they should perform more government functions. And that's really just rational. And that's why the president issued the administrative order devolving quite a number of functions to the LGU. So basically, performance of the functions follows the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Also, I'd like to ask the DBCC, basically, it's not just the renationalization of, for example, hospitals, but there are also new agencies that are pending in our plate, so to say, in the 18th Congress. I know we're in the final stages of passing the Department OFW, we'll probably have several amendments to that effect. But we all know the creation of a new agency entails funding. Definitely it will entail funding. And we have the Department of Water, the Department of Disaster Resilience, ang dami pong department. Tapos they're asking also now under the LEDAC, we had a request for the creation of the CDC, the creation of the Virology Institute of the Philippines, which I really don't know why we cannot just lump it all under the RITM and strengthen the RITM. Unfortunately now, binawasan pang pondo ng RITM. So talaga, may galit yata sa RITM. So binawasan yung pondo ng RITM. So may I also get the comment of our resource persons on the creation of new departments and agencies, particularly on the point of fiscal responsibility, Mr. Chairman. Maybe ask probably Secretary Dominguez and the DBM Secretary on their position on that, on the new agencies.
May I respond, Mr. Chairman?
Please
First,
go ahead, Your Honor. Please go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, again, the creation of the new departments should really be based on whether or not the service to the people will increase. Are you going to, in other words, in simple terms, are you going to get more bang for your buck? I'm quite surprised that there is this move for more departments when, in fact, in other governments I've seen, there's a consolidation of functions so that the bureaucracy is streamlined. If I'm not mistaken, Ben Jokno, when he was head of the DBM, proposed a right-sizing program for the government, and I think that if he did so, I think we should revisit it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response, Secretary Dominguez, and that's at least to guide us in future deliberations of these measures, Mr. Chairman. Going towards a point that was taken, or a topic that was taken a bit earlier, and I think, I'm not sure which senator, because I was listening into the commission appointments, but they brought up the topic of FLRs, Mr. Chairman. The for later release. I sound like a broken record to Secretary Dominguez because whenever I talk to him, I always ask him about the FLRs because really comply with the Supreme Court ruling on pork barrel and PDAF, that we come up with our what you call initiatives or advocacies into the line item budget. Some of us here are into heritage development, some are into cultural development, some are into infrastructure development. And I believe all these projects had to be approved by the agencies. I recall our Chairman Angara, said that if you had a project that you wanted to put in a particular advocacy or a particular program, make sure that the agency concurs with the funding requirement or the funding that will be given. So we all had to comply with that. Unfortunately, these programs have not moved because of the FLRs. What's the plan with the FLRs? Will it eventually be funded, Secretary? Because we need to know so that if it will be, we have to refund them again. These programs, for example, TechVoc, education, building of classrooms, and school buildings in all over the country, health centers. Do we need to refund them in the 2022 budget, or will it be eventually funded, as it said, for later release, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Zubiri, my understanding is yes, it will be funded. Now, may I, however, refer to Tina Kanda for the timing and the details of that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, so far the approvals have been coming in already from the Office of the President with regards to the FLR. So far, I think there has been 33 billion worth of projects from 10 batches that have been arriving, but we're still awaiting for the rest of the projects, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor.
So let me be clarified. It goes to the Office of the President for
the
final
review,
check,
Mr.
and then
Chair.
review, and then given to the DP. So what if the Office of the President, Madam Secretary, Mr. Chairman, will not release the review or will not give the release of these bills? They will be considered unfunded?
It will be considered not as unfunded because the funding is available, but it will be considered as unreleased appropriations, Your Honor, Mr. Senator, Mr. Chair.
Would that be in violation of the General Appropriations Act? Because that's a law. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just asking our legal luminaries here. I can see Senator Drilon. Maybe you want to weigh in, Senator Drilon, on what would happen to the funds if it is not.
I concur. The Secretary of the Budget that correctly said this will go under the status of unreleased appropriations. Now, whether the President is within his constitutional power to withhold the release, because the President has the power under the law and under the Constitution on the execution of laws, and whether or not a particular item in the budget is released, unfortunately, is a power of the President. And the assumption is that it should be released on the basis of national, of general welfare. Of course, that is always subject to debate. But just on the point of the authority, yes, the President has the authority to withhold the release. The motivation is something else for the non-release. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the comment of our distinguished Minority Floor Leader. Now, I raised this issue, Secretaries, because as Majority Floor Leader, ako yung kinakausap ng aking mga kasamaan sa kanilang institutional amendments. So you have to know where I'm coming from, since I am the MMDA of the Senate. In other words, I am the traffic enforcer of all legislation, and definitely I want to pass our priority measures. But of course, our colleagues also have institutional amendments that they want to follow through, like education, health. Very important yan, because they do this to be able to help our general public. Following the next, just my last question, Mr. Chairman, is on, I lost my train of thought because my staff gave me a piece of paper and I lost my train of thought. So, Mr. Chairman, basically, these are my questions.
Bukidnon Airport? Was it the Bukidnon Airport, Your Honor?
No, thankfully, the Bukidnon Airport was refunded.
No.
After, but Bukidnon Airport, after 5 years, still looks like a grassy field. But, so maybe, you know, Secretary Tugade, before he becomes Senator Tugade, maybe he should comply muna with his promise to have it cemented. But, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, yeah, these are just a few of the questions that I wanted to raise. And last, this is the point, my last point, I almost forgot. On the issue of vaccination, I'm glad that Secretary Dominguez is here, together with the DBM Secretary. Do we have enough funds, Secretary, for the completion of our vaccination program? We have, unfortunately, we've been doing only 300,000 a day vaccination. We should be up to about 500 to be able to 500,000 a day to be able to complete the full vaccination for herd immunity by end of December. Do we have vaccines forthcoming, Mr. Chairman? Maybe ask the Secretary if we have enough funds and we were able to purchase and order, and are the vaccines forthcoming?
Yeah, we'll give them another chance.
The reason I'm asking the DBCCs because they're the ones paying for it. So
that's right. Secretary Sanim gave us some numbers earlier, and I'll ask him to repeat those. Yung 150 million doses paid for, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'll put them on a slide now, right now, Mr. Chairman. So
yes, please, ComSec, can you assist the DOF in putting that slide up in response to the Majority Leader's question on the status of procurement of vaccines? Thank you.
So on this first slide is the summary of the vaccine doses secured by source. Okay, so we have received a total of we have enough received and on order to cover 100.83 million of our residents. Okay. Donations, we have 49.64 million doses. Multilateral financing, 105 million doses. The cost of which is 1.136 million, 1.136 billion US dollars. The source of the funds are from the national budget, 176.5 million dollars, enough for 15.5 million doses. And the private sector, we understand, has ordered 24.9 million doses. That's private sector and the LGUs. Now, let me show you the indicative delivery schedule. Do you have the next slide? Donations. Sorry. This is as of the 7th of September. From March, when we first got our first doses, until September 7, we have already received 52.79 million doses of vaccines. 17.12 million were donations to the national government. 32.09 were procured by the national government, and the LGU and private sector procurement are 3.57 million. For the rest of September, we are expecting a total of 37.58 million doses to be received. And from October to December of 2021, we are expecting the delivery of another 105.29 million doses for a grand total of 195 million doses of
Sani,
vaccines. Now,
thank
as I
you.
mentioned
Seksani,
earlier,
thank you.
Yeah.
Seksani.
Uh, yung sa macroeconomic parameters and assumptions o parameters assumptions for fiscal year 2021 to 2024, we noticed that we started with year 2021, real GDP growth of a projection of 6 to 7 percent. But if we go back a little to year 2020, ang GDP natin noong 2020, negative 9.6. So I would just like to be clarified, how can we achieve the projection, the real GDP growth projection of 6 to 7 when we would be coming from negative 9.6 in 2020. Just want to be clarified. Medyo bold, masyadong bold yung assumption natin to achieve 6 to 7% growth rate for 2021. In fact, as of August 2021, ang projection nasa mga 4 to 5. Is that correct? 4 to 5%. So I think masyadong ambitious yung 6 to 7 na projection. I would just like to have a more realistic projection along this line, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, may I
any of the
answer?
four resource persons can answer, but I saw in the presentation, Your Honor, Senator Ping, the estimate was made in July, I think. So perhaps I note also that the World Bank and the ADB and Moody's have much lower predictions. They're ranging from 4.5 to 5.3. So maybe we can ask Secretary Sani if he's ready to answer that on the GDP. Sec Sani or Sec Carl or
Thank
May
you.
I answer, Mr. Chair?
Should be in a better position to
Please
answer
go ahead,
this.
Carl.
Carl.
Thank you.
Carl, yeah.
The 6 to 7% was the DBCC projection prior to Delta. Since then, we have revised this to 4 to 5%.
Okay.
This is in my presentation a while ago. Mr. Chair, I would like to emphasize that we are in a very fluid situation right now. So prior to Delta, the 6 to 7 was very feasible, especially with the second quarter GDP number. But with the Delta, we had to revise to 4 to 5%.
Thank you, Secretary Carl. Now, I'll go to my questions on general principles. But before we discuss the proposed 2022 budget, I'd like to ask again NEDA on the implementation status of this year's budget, particularly on the three tenets, yung reset, rebound, recover. Ang tanong ko po, nasaan na tayo ngayon as we speak? Are we on reset? Are we on rebound or recover?
Mr. Chair, just 2 points on this, and I would like to request also DBM to respond on the details. What we are seeing right now is we are going forward and sometimes backward because of the nature of this virus. For instance, at the start of the year, we were on this rebound mode. Then suddenly there is the new variants that came around March. So we had to take a step back. When we have addressed that sometime in May and June, we were again on a rebound mode, and the second quarter GDP showed the numbers. But then towards the middle of July, the Delta variant risk came. So, Mr. Chair, we are in this parang two-step forward, sometimes 1 or 2-step backward mode because of this very fluid environment. So, but in terms of how we are actually spending on these matters, may I defer to DBM, Mr. Chair?
Thank you. By the Delta variant, hindi na realistic itong reset, rebound, recover. In fact, because of the Delta variant surge, yung ng mga COVID-19 cases, baka kailangan mag-adjust ng Congress in terms of interventions. And I would like to ask your opinion, your suggestions as to what interventions Congress would introduce to adapt to the present situation, the COVID situation. That's all on this topic. I mean,
Mr. Chair, if I may respond into
Yep, please go ahead,
two ways,
Carl.
and then maybe DBM can follow. Initially po, we were thinking itong reset, rebound, recover is a sequential event. But the reality right now is hindi na to sequential because after Delta, there is now, I heard, a new variant. We have to prevent that. So medyo meron po tayong forward and backward, forward and backward. That would entail actually some flexibility, I think, in the way we budget because we are preparing a budget, what we have submitted, based on our information at that time when we prepared. But given Delta and possibly other risk, we have to be ready. But if I may defer to DBM on the details po.
Yusek? Yusek Tina?
For instance, in line with Secretary Carl's statement, we did not provide any amount, Mr. Chair, for contact tracing. It's not because we slashed it. It's not even part of the DILG request because the DILG proposal was submitted at the time when there was no Delta. Insofar as the DOH is concerned, again, the recommendations that we did there is based on the fact that we had no idea that there would be variants that would affect the budgetary process at that point. So we actually submitted the budget with information available at the time. And we defer to both houses on how the adjustments will be made, given the new information that we have and the additional information on variants which might come and enter our country. That is all, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Ping, if you have any other
thank
questions.
you. Exactly my point. Ano? That's why I'm asking for your suggestions.
Kasi mag-i-intervene definitely yung Congress, both houses, and we would like to ask your opinion, anong areas ang i-adjust namin? For example, sa health sector budget, this is only 252.4 billion. Maybe we can make some adjustments along this line, and reduce the budget of other sectors para mapunan natin to be more responsive to the current health situation. And that's what I'm asking. Because as you said, yung budget call started in January and probably you finished printing the NEP in July or even earlier. So ano yung maisasuggest nyo for Congress in terms of adjustments? Kasi nandito na rin ito, instead na hindi kami mag-consult sa inyo, I'm consulting you already.
The Department of Health and the DILG for contact tracing.
Wait, the particular or the particulars in the adjustments that we should make as members of the legislature. And maybe the chairman can contribute in this regard, because he more or less has in a better position to see the overview of the entire budget distribution.
Yes, thank you, Senator Ping. Definitely, magbabago talaga yung hugis po nitong budget sapagkat yun nga, pre-Delta yung karamihan ng budget submissions, Your Honor. I think Senator Ralph's interpellation provides a very good initial guide when he mentioned the health interventions for SRA, for contact tracing, for testing, even for increasing the budget for vaccinations, Your Honor. I think those are a good starting point. And of course, we welcome any ideas from our colleagues, Your Honor.
Thank you. Again, let's go to the vaccination program. I think this is an urgent matter that we should discuss in detail. I have my own computation here based on the January 15 Committee of the Whole hearing when Secretary Dominguez briefed us on the the vaccine situation, ano. Ang sabi niya noon, ang average cost per vaccine is 446. This was attributed to the 68.2 million doses na expected to be donated, or some of which have already been donated, ano. COVAX facility, bilateral, private sector intervention, even LGUs. So he came up with an average cost, no, after factoring in all the donations in the quantity of 68.2 million doses. No, if that is a correct statement, because I'm just referring to the statement or the statement made by Secretary Dominguez last January 15. 68.2 million doses. So bumaba yung ating average cost to 446, no, from 515 plus 48 yung logistical or logistics cost. So yun na lang ang average. Now, since ang population natin 110 million Filipinos, and what we were trying to achieve at that time and even at this point in time is 70% of 110 million Filipinos to be vaccinated to achieve herd immunity. So I made some computations. Pagka multiply natin yung we're only dealing with the adult population, which is according to PSA, which constitutes 62%. If we multiply 62% those 110 million population, will come up with 69,300. That a correct figure, or 68,750,000. No, that is that would constitute the adult population, which is the target of the vaccination program initially, because we haven't decided yet kung yung 12 years old and above, wala pang plano tayo doon. Again, so kung 68,750,000 Filipinos, we will multiply that with 2, because there will be, never mind the Johnson & Johnson. Ano? So we'll be needing 137,500,000 vaccines, doses. Ano? So kung meron na tayong 68.2 million available from donations and private sector contributions, so we will just be needing 69,300,000. No? Multiply that with 563, no longer 446, kasi ito yung vaccines, doses of vaccines that we'll be needing. So ang kailangan nating ilabas na pera, kung 563 pesos yung cost per dose, would be 61.3 billion pesos. And we have already made available a total of 88.5 billion pesos. Ito yung funding sources niya, no? 70 billion on program, tapos foreign loans 1.9 billion, Bayanihan 2, 10 billion, continuing appropriations of 1.3 billion, sa GAA meron ding under the DOH budget na 2.5 billion, and then yung Presidential Contingent Fund na 2.8 billion. Ang total, 88.5 billion pesos. So hindi po tayo short. Sobra pa yung pera natin for us to purchase 69.3 million doses. No? Factoring in the 68.2 million doses na donated by or coming from different sources. So I'd like to be clarified, magkano talaga yung kailangan natin na at ilan, because I understand ang briefing ng IATF and even DOH, parang meron na tayong available na or book, no, na 170 plus million. doses. So, can we have some clarification on the figures?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Sec, please.
Mr. Chairman, to respond to Senator Lacson, we can provide an update as of September 5 on the sources and actual arrivals and the situation with the cost and the total amounts for the vaccines, including the sources of the money. I just don't have it in that form right now. So let me ask my colleagues here to put it in a form that will respond to the questions of Senator Lacson. Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
that
who
okay?
do you want us to recognize, Secretary?
No. I will. I don't have the answers in the form that Senator Lacson puts it, but I will provide it in sometime this afternoon.
Okay,
Is that okay?
Thank you,
certainly.
sir.
Is that all right with Senator Lacson?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have
Thank you.
here
Thank
flash on the screen yung vaccine procurement and delivery update. Ano? Ang source nito, DOH. Delivered, procured 31.06 million, donated 16.94 million, a total of 48 million. Ito, no? Tapos expected to arrive in September, 23 million, of which 2 million would come from donation or donations, and ang total niyan 25 million. Ang total lahat nito 187.53 million. Bakit may point?
Mr. Chairman, we will check these figures because I don't know if this includes already the private sector expected arrivals, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Sige, Secretary, please submit na lang in response
So
to...
wait for the submission this afternoon,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, just to
Thank you.
facilitate the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes.
Senator Lacson. We'd like to acknowledge also Senator Revilla. Our staff told us he's logged in. Good afternoon, sir.
Also, we'd like to be clarified on the yung breakdown ng loans natin. If yes. Ito yung sa amin, ano, and we need some validation. 23.9 billion pesos from the World Bank under the Philippines COVID-19 Emergency Response Project Additional Financing. 19.1 billion pesos from the Asian Development Bank, no, ADB, under the Second Health System Enhancement to address and limit COVID-19, Hill 2 source from the, anyway. 14.3 billion pesos from the AIIB. So can we have the latest update or the status sa breakdown ng mga loans, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we will also provide that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. So I guess
Sen
we have
Ping,
other
your
concerns, but
your time is up, but you can ask one last question, please.
no, it's okay. I'll just ask these questions pagdating sa mga agencies because mas masasagot ng mga agencies concerned itong other questions. So that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. And thank you to Secretary Dominguez.
Thank you very much, Senator Ping, and we remind the committee secretary to follow up later on with the DOF for the responses in writing to the questions of Senator Lacson. So next, I think Vice Chair Marcos is now with us, so she will recognize her for her 10 minutes, and then after her is Vice Chair Villar. Go ahead, Vice Chair Marcos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask the DBM, please, in terms of percent allocation to total budget, the social services sector will get only 38.3% of the entire budget, of 5.24 trillion. Although I think Yusek Toledo mentioned earlier that 1.9 trillion is actually dedicated to social services. Hindi ko po makita yun kasi ang nakikita ko, it's only 1.3% higher than the percent in than the 2020 actual percent share of 40.7. I think these figures are correct. We went over them time and time again. The point being that there are no marked increases at all in social programs and projects to address the pandemic, despite cases reaching 20,000 per day, and everyone acknowledging that more or less 2 million additional Filipinos will be plunged into poverty. So I am baffled by these priorities and the lack of ayuda or cash for work or any other programs that will aid immediately in alleviating the difficulties encountered by many of our fellow our countrymen. Yes, Tina, please, or Yusek Toledo, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Nakamute ka. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I be allowed.
Please go
As
ahead.
mentioned,
Yes.
as mentioned earlier, Madam Senator, the amount that we allocated to DOH or the health sector plus the social services sector as a whole was based on the assumption that this was pre-Delta. So at that point, the incidence of COVID affected citizens was not that high. So that's the reason why that's the percentage that we have. But we admit that at this point, it may no longer be applicable to the current situation.
Yes, there was mention earlier of just growing the contingency funds, the calamity funds, sticking additional funds in the unprogrammed. Are there any other suggestions from the DBM? Because we certainly have to address this. We are quite definitely in the post-Delta era.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be best not to include it in any special purpose fund because when it becomes part of a special purpose fund, it dilutes the importance of any initiative to increase the contribution or the amount for that sector. So it might be best to include it in a specific budget of the department concerned.
So you're lending support officially to Bayanihan 3 or some such bill in the future?
I did not say that, Your Honor. I was just talking about the 2022 budget.
Just asking. Yes, just asking because it's clearly going to be a very urgent problem. The issue also is that given the all-around dismal labor figures, despite the lowest recorded unemployment rate, we don't see any job generation effort that's specific in DOLE. In fact, DOLE continues to have the usual camp, tupad that are not only pre-Delta, but are pre-COVID. I think DTI has also mentioned that they're undertaking several job generation efforts, but this is the era of big government, and this is the time for a lot of emergency spending. Why are we not seeing any of that? It looks very much like business as usual. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, our recommendation is based on the requests that we receive. So the proposals of DOLE.
So Tina, you're saying that DOLE has not initiated any effort to generate jobs, whether in cash for work or expanded tupad efforts. DTI has not recommended anything out of the ordinary from pre-COVID days?
I must admit that I have to look at the budget proposal submitted, Your Honor. It might be part of the tier 2 But as to the readiness of the program, that we have to determine before it can form part of the recommended level for DOLE, for instance, or even DTI. So
It's a real problem because what is the recovery? What's the rebound we're talking about if we can't put money in people's pockets, whether through job generation programs, ayuda, or other income transfers? There's nothing specific here that looks like we're going to recover from all of this.
The only amount that we found is a 20.9 increase for TUPAD, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman. So I think in the event that there are other programs, and the department itself must be able to tweak it within their government budgets.
Well, as we know full well, TUPAD is a very small program. It's now mired in all kinds of scams as well. And we really need to get more serious about a new deal that is sustainable, digital, and health conscious. Household consumption remains subdued, growth at 7.2% in the second quarter, compared to an average decline of 15.3%. I think those are NEDA figures. So we must provide more income transfers to households. Isn't it also a consideration that rather than spending on just infrastructure, we should also disburse to the SWD, DOLE, and the others, so that consumption will be quickly regenerated and a genuine stimulus is engendered? Maybe Secretary Carl can give us some ideas. We're in a little bit of a panic over this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, if I may respond. The reason why the budget is presented as it is, no, is that we believe that the government's main role is not to create job, but to enable that job creation. And there are two ways we can do this. Number one is our policy response to avoid harsh lockdowns when the far majority can work. The second is our infrastructure program remains the key measure of enabling the economy. Our estimate here is the multiplier on output is 2 and unemployment is 3. So every 1 million, I think, creates 3 jobs. The budget of DOLE, DTI, and the other departments are more of additional support that should be more targeted, should not cover all sectors, and for social protection in case they may be affected by the by some crisis. That is why the budget is presented as is. That is why we propose that we continue with the program on infrastructure while having some budget sufficient for social protection or additional support to the most affected sectors. Thank you.
Yes, I've heard the secretary say that before, but you yourself said that we will have to live with this virus and all its variants in the future. It's not really about to go away so quickly. And every lockdown has cost the economy 150 billion per week. And these lockdowns are in some form or other probably inevitable until all the vaccination takes place. So I think that argument cannot hold. I think also that infrastructure should be broadened to new, perhaps build 2.0 that includes hospitals, that includes other infrastructure such as the digital network that we are also dependent on. It's probably time to look at your infrastructure program. It looks outdated. We've seen the efforts in the US, they're completely different at this point in time. Hindi po ba, Secretary Carl?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I agree. In fact, the infrastructure program that we have presented is broader. It is beyond road transport. Meron na po yung digital. In fact, my report kanina on the national ID is one of the key ways to broaden that digital infrastructure. Kasama na rin po dito yung sa agriculture and health.
Secretary Carl, except the national ID still does not address the failure to invest in digital infrastructure like every other country in Asia has. We're the only
Opo.
government that's entirely dependent upon telecoms and other private companies to invest in infrastructure for online and other networks. That's
Opo.
been a problem, di ba?
Yes, ma'am, because most of our telecom is really private sector led. That is why our policies on, for instance, helping the private sector, telco towers erect faster, and on the other support natin sa internet transactions, sa data transmission ay makakatulong po. But the reason why hindi po siya marami sa budget is private sector led po kasi. So our support is more on the policy or enabling environment.
Which has also been the source of so many of our problems and failures because it's all private sector owned. As a result, we're paying for our sins indeed. I have a question also regarding the investment in agriculture, which is now imperative given that our August 2021 inflation rates have come in at 4.9, way past our projected 2 to 4%. Clearly, the inflationary pressure we have experienced is mainly food related. Chicken, pork driving it up before, fish driving it additionally now, in addition to vegetables and other basic commodities. Do we think that there is enough investment in agriculture, in supply services, given the specific needs of every industry, particularly in hog production, for example? The Department of Agriculture, I believe, was given 72 billion, which is not a significant increase from the last couple of years.
Mr. Chair, on the agriculture, Senator Marcos is correct, no? It is pork, fish, and vegetable. We are trying to address the supply gaps, but the long-term solution really is repopulation. And I understand DA has provided some support. I cannot speak lang for DA on the details.
Yes, I understand. It's
On-
not fair. I really should ask DA specifically. But in terms of the overall budget, it seems quite meager given that it's been the source of so many problems.
May I defer to DBM or DA in terms of, kasi sila po yung nag-propose
Okay,
and
okay,
approve
yes.
ng budget
Yes,
ng DA.
please. Yes, po.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Senator, the decrease in the budget of DA is a result of the reduction primarily for the farm to market roads. But if you remove that from the equation, they actually have an increase because of foreign assisted projects. So the decrease is the reduction from farm to market roads as a result of the Mandanas Garcia case, and then the non-recurring items plus the terminated projects under DA. So the increase naman could be attributed to the foreign assisted projects that are on board. So yun po yung basic picture as far as DA is concerned.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, with the permission
Senator
of
Kiko, go ahead.
Senator Marcos.
Go ahead, Senator Kiko.
Of course.
Yes, just on that point, to the DBM Secretary, the budget proposal of the DA was about 250 billion.
Yes,
but
Your
what was-
Honor.
and therefore, it was slashed into 122 billion, but that includes NIA. So really,
Yes, Your Honor.
very, very meager, no? And yung 72 billion, just for the livestock sector, actually the hog industry alone, it's already lost close to 100 billion last year. Pero ganito ang response ng gobyerno. So I just would like to be clarified. Why was it slashed at, from 250 billion to actually 72 billion? Hindi sinama yung NIA because NIA is Office of the President.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Senator, when DA submitted a budget proposal, they were fully aware that any request or proposal coming from the department should be supported by the necessary justification, number one, and number two, that it must be complete and the implementation ready. At the point when they submitted it, Mr. Chair and Honorable Senator, they submitted to us a list It was simply a list of programs and projects. And so as a result, when they competed against the whole universe of tier 2 proposals, they could not, their submission to us could not be justified because the tier 1 would comprise all the ongoing programs and projects of departments. The tier 2, for which the bulk of their 200 plus billion proposal constitute, this is evaluated and then this is ranked according to readiness, project implementation readiness,
Tina, are you
absorbing
saying that the
capacity of
DA
the
did not
agency.
submit anything?
They
That
just
was ready?
submitted rough, yun hong requirements namin, hindi na comply. So, hindi naman ho namin siya ma-evaluate kung ganun lang po ang submission sa amin.
Hala, Senator Kiko, ano ba yun?
And may I comment on that?
Hindi ginawa
Go
yung
ahead,
homework.
Vice Chair Villar. Yeah.
Ba yun?
Because I'm the vice chairman for agriculture, I think 250 is out of range kasi last year ang budget din nila ganyan. So hindi naman mo tinitriple ang budget agad-agad. Diba? There is also a question of can you do it? Oo. Kasi talaga ang budget ng DA minus NIA is really something like that. Oo, 70. Oo.
Yes,
Kasi, so, tingin ko, yung 250 is out of range naman. Kasi you don't triple your budget in a year because there will be a question of whether you can implement it because it will entail people to implement it and offices. So, I think masyadong malaki yung 250 and hindi lang nila in-increasean. So,
yes. Just one quick manifestation, and I know.
Go ahead, Senator Kiko.
Yes, and thank you to the Senator Marcos. We are precisely looking at the broad, longer view. No? That eventually we should have maybe double, triple, or quadruple the agri budget over a period of maybe 5-6 years. Kasi talaga napapag-iwanan. I remember, and I reiterated this, I manifested this before. During my first term in the Senate, the budget for infrastructure combined was about 200 billion. Today, it's over 1 trillion, no? In a span of maybe 10 years, 10, 15 years. This is DOTR and DPWH. So, sabi ko nga, mahalaga ang infrastructure. Pero, mas mahalaga din ang pagkain. Mas mahalaga pa nga if you consider it dahil talagang so yun sana strategically no pagka hinihingi yung 250 wag naman sana 72 sana man lang naging 100 or thereabouts but I'm just manifesting that Madam Chair Mr. Chairperson and Madam Senator Marcos and of course Senator Villar.
may
Senator Kiko. Yeah, go ahead, Senator Villar.
I'm writing a bill. There are only 3 sector of DA. It's the crops, a majority of them composed of coconut and rice, and then the livestock, poultry and dairy, and then fisheries. So I'm writing a bill for livestock, poultry and dairy based on a study that is being done now so that we can salvage that livestock, poultry, and dairy, which before was private sector led. Now it's having a hard time because of ASF, and I don't think they have given a lot of attention to dairy. After 25 years, the production of dairy is 1% of demand, when there are 2 agencies existing for dairy for the last 25 years. So I'm going to write a bill and that will automatically increase their budget for this year. Plus yung Coco Levy Fund, that would be a big budget also. Because the minimum budget for that is 5 billion, but it can be increased anytime as long as we see that they can implement what we are asking them to implement. It's not about the amount of budget, it's how you implement the budget. Because we can give all the budget we can to agriculture, but if they don't implement it well, then nothing will happen. So, kaya gusto ko nasa batas para sinusunod nila yung content ng batas na susundin nila kung saan nila dadalhin kasi minsan hindi natin malaman kung saan dinadala eh. So, don't worry, Senator Kiko, I'm going to write the bill now
Yes.
for the livestock, poultry, and dairy.
Yes.
And I think they're doing well na sa rice, and I think they will do good sa coconut. Tong fisheries lang kasi more of environmental tong fisheries eh. Kaya it's a combination of the protection of the environment and at the same time development. So medyo complicated yung fisheries.
Yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am. And one final point lang. Earlier
Go ahead,
the
Senator.
Secretary of NEDA, Secretary Carl said that half of the unemployment came from agriculture, the job loss.
Yeah.
And we would like to think that the interventions, with the help of our subcommittee vice chair and of course our chair, should be more than what has been provided. Sabi nga kalahati nung nawalan ng trabaho sa agri-sector. So dapat naman mabigyan ng kaukulang pansin sa budget yung pagsuporta sa kanila. Thank you.
I think we should ask NEDA what part of agriculture yung nawala yung trabaho para we will know where to go. Oo, kasi ngayong I'm surprised na ang daming nawalan ng trabaho sa agriculture unless it's manufacturing or because of ASF. Oh, yun
You
lang
can
ang
ask,
nakikita ko. So please
permission
make
of,
a report. Yeah.
With the permission of Senator Marcos, can we ask NEDA to respond to the points made by Senator Marcos, Senator Pangilinan, and Senator Villar regarding the job loss in agriculture?
On
Sec. Carl.
Mr. Chair, on agriculture, I am referring to the June survey to July survey, where around more than 1 million jobs were taken off the agriculture. Now, as to the sectors, may I request Undersecretary Dennis Mapa to provide the breakdown, or we can submit at the soonest possible time. I do not have it lang right now within agriculture.
Okay lang to
So
submit.
is that okay with the senators that they submit that data on the
If
jobs
Senator
breakdown?
Villar is requesting livestock, crops,
Sure.
fish,
Okay.
we will submit. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Secretary
much.
Carl. Go ahead. Back to you, Vice Chair Raimi.
Yes, thank you very much. And because of that, I think the argument that the job of government today is merely to enable job generation. There is no way that jobs can be generated in the remote rural countryside. The truth is there's hardly any private investment out in the rural areas where the jobs have been lost. It is therefore the duty of government to generate those jobs in some way or other and to put money in the pockets of these farmers, more income transfers to households to finally stimulate domestic consumption. I think we should be wary also of sudden agricultural and health devolution because our experience with the first devolution has not exactly been salutary. And lastly, as a manifestation, Mr. Chairman, the Mandanas ruling was merely about the share of the local government units in the era now called the NTA, that it should be expanded to include not merely income taxes, but also the other collections, revenues in customs and other duties of government. However, in EO 108 and in the devolution transition plan, it's very clear that there's full devolution in agriculture, in health, and so on. So I stand by my chairman in saying that there has to be a more coherent and comprehensive, perhaps even locally individualized plan for not only these hospitals, but also the agriculture sector. Really, there is no silver bullet. And at the end of 2022, all of these functions, these hospitals will be fully devolved. Nowhere in the decision of Mandanas is that said. And may I therefore implore that this body, as well as the officials representing different departments and agencies here, consider that the devolution of the health function should be placed at the bottom of the line of services to be fully devolved given the pandemic that we are facing at the end of 2024 rather than compelling full devolution in 2022. And the same goes for the supply and distribution chains that have cost us so much suffering and hunger in the agricultural and food sector. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That will be all for now.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Marcos. Your 10 minutes exactly. Ang galing. Now we go to Vice Chair Cynthia. If she's already wants to ask questions, it's her turn.
Okay.
After her is Vice Chair Villanueva, Vice Chair Pia Cayetano, and Vice Chair Hontiveros. Senator Tolentino has given way.
Never mind.
Vice Chair Villar, you have the floor, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to ask this from the Department of Finance. Actually, it's a policy question. How do we balance the recovery of our economy and our COVID-19 concerns? Because I don't think the MSMEs, which are 99% of our businesses and 65% of our employment, are at their lowest ebb right now. So how do you balance that? That we will lose our micro, small, and medium enterprises because of these COVID concerns.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. May I
Go
respond?
ahead, Sexani. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
First of all, the legislature already has enacted the CREATE bill. And in the CREATE bill, the legislature reduced the corporate income tax rate from 30% to 20% for the MSMEs, and from 30% to 25% for the larger corporations. So in that way, that is the largest fiscal stimulus program for corporations ever enacted, for which we want to thank the legislature. That amounts, by the way, that amounts to around 100 billion pesos in foregone revenue per year. So again, through the guidance of the Senate and the House, that is one way we have begun to balance the response to business as such. So that's a tax reduction. The second thing, the Senate also provided infusion in capital to the three financial institutions and have mandated them to increase the amount of financial assistance to MSMEs. And this is capital to Land Bank, to DBP, and to the Philippine Guarantee Corporation, which have been very actively involved in increasing the loans and the guarantees to the MSMEs. So it's those two programs have helped. Of course, we realize that is not sufficient, because you can pump money into the MSMEs, but if there is no demand, the demand will, they will not borrow, they will not have anything to have people to buy. And that is why we have funded the acquisition of vaccines to the extent of around 88 billion pesos last year, this year, and we will continue to increase fundings for vaccinations, particularly for booster shots, if it is approved by the FDA and the panel of experts. So it's a balance. It's a balance of vaccinations so that people will be resistant to the disease, so that the economy will be allowed to open, it's vaccinations, as I mentioned last night, Senator Villar, to teachers, so that teachers and administrators of schools, so that schools can reopen. And again, we have also improved the funding for the healthcare system. So again, there is a balanced approach, and the main culprit here, as I have also mentioned in several fora, is the virus, and it has in fact imprisoned our population and not allowed them the normal economic activities that they are doing. So we have done it on both sides, provided financial support through tax cuts, provided financial support through additional financing availability, including guarantees, as well as protection for people's health. Thank you, ma'am.
I just want to take your solutions one by one. First of all, what you said about create. Let's be practical about it. Maybe the medium-sized company will profit from create, but the small and micro, I don't think they're paying income taxes. I mean, there's small companies na hindi na natin masyadong pinapansin at pero marami sila. Oo. So I don't think the small and micro will benefit from the income tax relief na ibinigay ng create. Oo. So medyo malabo yan sa small and micro. Oo. And then yung sinasabi mo na capital sa Land Bank and DBP, I'm speaking as a small entrepreneur when I started. You don't borrow when there's no market. They're not opening anything new now because they cannot even make money on what they have. How can they borrow to build another one, or they won't borrow just to finance their losses? I don't think so. What they do is they cut their employees. Let's say merong isang maliit na tindahan, 15 empleyado niya o 10, magiging 2, 1, 3, and then that is unemployment. Oh, but they don't borrow because there's no use borrowing, because the only thing they want now is just to meet their expenses na sila, break even. So talaga ang kailangan nila ay market, di ba? That's why you said that you will solve it through vaccination. But napansin ko lang sa policy ng IATF, they don't want to give any special privilege to the vaccinated. Oo. How can you convince those who do not want to be vaccinated when you are fully vaccinated and you're not allowed to go out and enjoy life naman? Parang ganun. Dapat i-insist nyo sa IATF na pag vaccinated, bigyan naman ng privileges para yun namang ayaw magpa-vaccinate, ma-convince natin na ma-vaccinate para ma-vaccinate natin ang ating target para mabuksan natin ang ating economy for the sake of the small and micro enterprises na umiiyak na sila talaga ngayon. What do you say to that, Secretary Dominguez? Kasi ikaw siguro ang may influence sa IATF na gumawa ng ganitong policy.
Yeah, Sec, before you answer, I'd like to second what Vice Chair Villar said, because I received a position paper from the Restaurants Association, and they are asking na they be permitted to allow indoor dining even during certain levels of quarantine, so long as those who will dine present their vaccine cards, which is the suggestion of Vice Chair Villar. Maybe you can take that up with the you can respond, and you can take it up also with the IATF, Sec. But let's hear your response, Secretary.
Thank you very much. No, I fully agree, Mr. Chairman, with yourself and with Senator Villar. However, sometimes in the IATF, we are a lonely voice of trying to put rationality into the trying to convince people that the idea of lockdowns don't really work for the entire community.
Yeah.
And that I agree that vaccinated people should be provided more mobility than others. In fact, I have asked my colleagues, my like-minded colleagues in the IATF in the next meeting to suggest that we open more the economy, but require the businesses, particularly the larger businesses, to provide weekly testing and tracing and move towards rational approach to managing the containment of the virus. So I've asked my colleagues to please support that idea that we open but we increase testing by asking the companies to do the testing. Again, of course, as I was talking to one of the big businessmen this morning, vaccinate, and continue vaccinating, because that is the only solution that we can see at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary.
I want to inform the secretary that in our company, we have a testing center. We give free testing to our employees and even to other people if they need it. And then we're vaccinating. But we have to give some privileges to the vaccinated para ma-convince natin yung matitigas ang ulo na magpa-vaccinate, because that's the only way. Kasi why will they be vaccinated when they enjoy the same privileges as the vaccinated? Oh, and I don't want you to stay as a lonely voice in the IATF. You talk to the president. You should not be a lonely voice in the IATF, because the life of the economy will depend upon you, and it is your job to protect this economy, because if we let this economy fall apart, then our employment will fall apart also, because that is where they are employed. Yun lang ang pakiusap ko sa iyo, Secretary Sani. Don't remain a lonely voice in the wilderness, because we depend on you. That's all.
Ma'am, I didn't mean I am the only lonely voice. I think we are a trio or quartet of lonely voices.
Maybe you should include more business-oriented people there in the committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Para hindi
I
kayo
think you are
lonely
right.
voice. And you talk to the president, he listens to you. Okay, thank you very much.
No, in fact, Senator Villar, Mr. Chairman, may I just make a comment? Actually, I got that idea of the testing by the private sector from Senator Villar from our talk last night. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're trying to help. I'm not saying this because I come from business. Yung big business, hindi kaya nilang survive. Ang mahihirapan dito talaga, the small, micro, and medium enterprises, not us. We're used to this. We experienced this in 1997, so we can survive. But the small, micro, and medium enterprises, sila ang kawawa, and marami sila, hindi tayo. Kawawa din tayo kasi magagalit sa atin yan. Baka wala nang bumoto sa atin sa eleksyon. Thank you very much.
You're done, Senator Villar.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your suggestions. We'll before we recognize the next interpolator, who is Vice Chair Senator Joel Villanueva, with his indulgence, Senator Pia is raising her hand. Senator Pia, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Just a very quick one, Senator Joel. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just want to inform you that the bill that we co-authored on the vaccination passport, you, me, and Senator Gilon, has been read on first reading and has been referred to your committee, the Committee on Finance. Now, I know you're very busy already, but in the interest of pursuing this, if His Honor would like me as Vice Chair to conduct a hearing, I'll be happy to do that just to move it forward to assist IATF
Sure.
in
Sure. We
pulling
coordinate with you, Madam Vice Chair. Definitely. That's a very important measure, I think.
Thank you. So yeah, we're happy to do it because we want to support IATF in this direction of providing a vaccine passport that will allow them to provide extra benefits to vaccinated people and as an incentive to get vaccinated. Thank you.
Certainly. We'll get back to you on that soonest, Your Honor. Now we recognize Vice Chair Villanueva, the Chair of the Senate Committee on Labor. Sir, good afternoon. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, dear colleagues, sa ating mga bisita, Secretary Dominguez, Secretary Carl, and the rest. Good morning. Good afternoon na ho pala. I'll be very short, but first of all, let me associate myself to the statements made by our chair and Senator Villar and Secretary Dominguez. I've spoken with a lot of restaurant owners, salons, etc., who had been operating for quite some time, and when they were operating before, none of them actually had an incident na may nahawa or nagkaroon ng hawahan dun sa lugar nila. And so it's for them, it's an extreme move na itong mga nangyayari na ito. And I hope na hindi maging lonely voice si Secretary Dominguez at mga kasamahan niya sa mga IATF meetings. Let me start, Mr. Chair, by saying I'm not going to dwell much on the vaccination program and procurement of vaccines, etc. But let me just point out 2-3 points, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to ask NEDA, si Secretary Carl, who was listening attentively to his presentation and projected growth rate, no, at in-adjust na ho natin. If I recall, you were saying with the original 6 to 7% growth rate, naging 4 to 5%. Tapos nag-adjust din tayo sa mga projections natin, yung ibang variables, including perhaps yung projection natin, Secretary Carl, on the unemployment rate with the revised GDP growth. Is that correct, Your Honor?
Mr. Chair, meron po akong kaninang present na table, no? So, depende kasi yan sa quarantine status. So, halimbawa po sa ECQ, nag-estimate po yung NEDA, ang ma-affect sa NCR plus is 607,000. Yung bumaba po tayo sa MECQ, naging 310,000. So, meron po kaming table na we can submit again. Pero yan po yung estimate ng NEDA for every week that we declare a certain level of quarantine.
And with that, included na ho ba doon yung anticipation natin that this Delta variant will linger or perhaps another new variant would come in?
Sa aming estimate po, so long as we do not revert to the ECQ,
okay.
I think kaya po yung ating estimated growth rate and employment. So dapat po under our programming, itong MECQ dapat matapos na by next week kasi na-extend po siya, no, by 1 week. And we will gradually move towards the granular lockdown system para everyone else can work and recover.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Yusek Carl. Secretary Carl, sorry. Let me talk about job generation programs of the government. I think this is very important, if not one of the most important program that we need to tackle. A while ago, I was listening to Senator Imy's statements on job generation. Senator Kiko made mention about the agricultural sector, some 50%, I think, yung job losses doon, and we will wait for that breakdown, Your Honor. I was looking at TUPAD, and it was mentioned a while ago. From 6 billion last year, we increased it to 19 billion of this year. I wonder if we have had the opportunity to assess the implication of this increase in budget for emergency employment program. I myself, I am a believer of this program. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been going around, and emergency employment program is a vital component into national recovery, and it's just that perhaps there should be some sort of tweaking, as Senator Amy made mention. There's so much room for improvement, and one, is there an evaluation of this program? Two, are there any other recommendations? For instance, the 10-day program, the 10 days period of time ng emergency employment. I actually filed a bill, Senate Bill number 1456, to institutionalize this and perhaps entertain the idea. For example, if you are in a particular town or area na may industriya, yung period of training pwedeng gamitin doon, no? Yung employment days nila, and then you can stretch it to 1 month or so with the supervision, of course, of TESDA and other government institutions. And then after that, the industry within the area can actually hire these would-be trainees under the TUPAD program. Something to that effect. I just wanted to find out again if we are looking into this particular program, and if NEDA made an evaluation of TUPAD.
Mr. Chair, not yet per my staff, but this is something that we had recommended before, no? In response to your proposed bill, that before we put into legislation, we first do an evaluation. So this is something we would we can do.
Yeah, thank you for that, Secretary Carl. But I also believe na kahit wala namang batas, we can do this. We can actually look into this strategy, no? Pangalawa, yung TESDA programs, for instance, kanina binanggit yung job creation or papaanong mabubuhay, may kakabuhay yung ating mga kababayan, especially in the suburb areas. TESDA has a STEP program, yung special training for employment program. I was at the helm of TESDA when we introduced this program, and they're continuing this program. I'm glad that they're continuing this program, that TESDA would go to the communities, they would conduct community-based training programs, and after the program, when they graduate, when they get assessed and they pass the assessment program, they would get the equipment needed. For example, welding machines man ito, or toaster, or baking products, etc. They would be able to to find ways papaano kumita at mabuhay. I wonder if we are looking at this particular program as well, Secretary Carl.
On the TESDA po, we have not really done the evaluation, pero magandang opportunity po, Senator, that we have this National Employment Recovery Strategy, and there are really programs under TESDA. So I intend to make a recommendation to the nurse committee to look into this. We have done some programs ng TESDA meron, yung apprenticeship meron din. I'll just try to ask my staff to collect some of these evaluation to share with you. But as to the rest, no, I think it's an opportune time nga to evaluate yung effectiveness ng mga programs na ito. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Secretary Carl. No, I'll go there doon sa nurse, which is also one of the things I have been pushing for itong National Employment Recovery Strategy. To date, Secretary Carl, meron ng committee, and if I recall, there's already Executive Order number 140, and merong inilaan na pondo, if I'm not mistaken, 1.14 trillion. Target is 220,000 jobs to assist 1.4 million displaced workers. Can you talk more about this? And perhaps pwede mo ba malaman ano yung mechanisms natin? Are there mechanisms in place to monitor these programs? Kasi for example, we have been talking about TESDA programs, pero bumaba yung program nila sa STEP. Tapos yung mga nakaraang panahon, yung utilization has been a big problem. In fact, yung mga private schools are already complaining because they're not being tapped. I'm sure we will all raise this in the budget of TESDA, but these are the things, no, that we need to make sure are all in place so that the nurse program, the National Employment Recovery Strategy program, will be a success.
Mr. Chair, Senator Joel, I can speak siguro broadly about
Kailangan ko,
the
Lan!
program.
Tulong, Lan!
What, Senator? Sorry.
Lan?
What was that, Your Honor?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I heard something else from Senator Joel. Ako yata
Nawawala ako, Mr. Chair.
We
May I
still hear
proceed?
you. We still hear you, Your Honor.
Naulanan siya.
Okay. Thank you.
Tinapag yun na si Joel.
Nagising tuloy si Senator Bato.
Hello?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Secretary Carl.
Yeah, I just want to say, Senator, Mr. Chair, I can speak broadly about the program, pero yung detalye po, kasi under the nurse, no, meron pong component for skills upgrading and retooling. The concept here is we are entering a new normal.
Lan!
Dahan-dahan po.
You may want to mute your microphone, Joel,
Oo nga
when
eh.
you talk to
Okay.
Alan.
Sorry.
Okay, may I proceed finally? Yeah, basically the idea here is we are entering this new normal. There are some jobs that need to be retooled or reskilled. No? So there are components under the TESDA, DTI, DOT, DA for various skills and retooling programs. So sa tingin ko po, Senator Joel, Mr. Chair, if you want to know more about the details of the program, it would be better to ask the implementing agencies. But our role here really is to make sure that itong mga affected sectors have a means to reintegrate faster, whether it is in their sector right now or in a new sector that may require those skills and jobs. As I mentioned po, we will look into, I will make a proposal to the nurse committee to provide some evaluation of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Carl. Yung target na 220,000, are you aware of that? Is that the target, the target to generate 220,000 jobs?
Let me check po with my team to be sure if I
Because
can come
it's
back.
part of the Executive Order 140. Part of it is the 1.14 trillion budget that will be put into place to ensure that there is a one direction insofar as employment recovery program is concerned. My only point, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Carl, is that if we can actually have a mechanism to know this, of one, can we have a breakdown, siguro kahit for submission, breakdown nitong jobs that we wanted to create in what particular sector, and yung mechanisms lang, I think I've been emphasizing the importance of having that mechanism to ensure that we'll be able to monitor, Sir Secretary. I'm sure you share the same sentiment of this representation, so that we would know, we would find out saan tayo, nasaan na tayo, anong sa region, for example, sa region ng Zamboanga Peninsula, for example, ano ba yung industries that have the potential of creating more jobs in what particular sector, and that's what we have been targeting and where we are right now. Yun lang po, I hope that we can do that because again, we are here to help in any way we can. We wanted to make sure that this will fly and this will be a great success, itong National Employment Recovery Strategy, which I fully support, Your Honor.
I will, Mr. Chair, confer with the chairman of the NERS, no, DTI and DOLE Secretary. Kasi although meron pong mga nakasulat po sa aming programa and the EO on the intended beneficiary. As to the details, if I may get back
Okay.
on your questions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sec Carl. I'm sure you know that that is very important. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, sa DBM lang po, kay OIC Secretary ng DBM, you made mention kanina yung adjustment doon sa DOH, no, yung na-devolve yung fund doon sa mga LGUs. Yung DPWH din ho kasi bumaba yung pondo nila this year, if I'm not mistaken, from 694 billion to 685 billion. Ang question ko lang ho, ganun din ho ba? May kinalaman din po ba ito doon sa implementation of the Mandana sa Garcia ruling?
Mr. Chair, Your Honor, there are two things that influence the decrease in the level of DPWH. Number one, as you mentioned, you are correct, the Mandana's ruling whereby locally funded projects will now be undertaken by the local government units. And number two, a significant portion of the 2021 budget of DPWH included the projects which were discontinued as a result of the pooling under Bayanihan 1 of the budgets for yung small capital outlays ng LIPs po.
So it's nothing to
as
do
a
with the Mandana's ruling. Yes. Okay. Thank
Yes,
you. Thank
and
you.
so as a
That's
result,
all I'm
we'll
asking.
remove that.
I'm satisfied with your answer, ma'am. Ma'am, isa pa ho, no, yung extension of budget vis-a-vis the compliance to cash-based budgeting. If you look at the, I don't know if my staff can show this table, yung 2020 budget po and the continuing appropriations of national government agencies, nasa 3 trillion. But if you look at the disbursed funding, that's 2.127, no? Yun yung statement of appropriations, allotments, obligations, disbursements, and balances. The same statement also cites that some agencies still record very low obligation and disbursement rates, no? For example, yung napin natin yung isang example ko, yung DICT, for example, 74.10%. 74.10% yung sa DICT. Yes, the same table, please. Yung sa DICT, ayan, no, 74.10%, tapos ang disbursement rate is 31.70%. Ayan po, nasa may bandang gitna ho. Ang question ko lang, ma'am, is that will you recommend an extension on the deadline to obligate the 2021 GAA to 2022?
At this point, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, at this point we don't, because we're hoping that they can catch up. I mean, the ICT among the number of agents or departments in that list would constitute an exception. The ICT and I think NEDA, but I don't think the DOTR would probably be also in that area. But these are high obligation rates already as a general rule. So
Okay.
they can obligate the funds. It's just that the disbursements would have to catch up.
I understand that. It's just that, of course, not all departments have the same function. They have different functions. I am from TESDA before. I know for a fact that we can obligate funds, but then the disbursement will come only after the training program has been
Yes,
implemented. No, so okay. Next question, ho. Every year I've been pounding on this particular topic, itong ating government workforce. Our chair, Senator Angara, made mention a while ago yung sa DOH, and pinakita ko kanina yung table ng sa DOH. Looking at our government workforce, according to the staffing summary for 2020, out of the 1.9 million permanent positions in the government, around 9.4% or 177,994 remains unfilled. And Secretary Yusek, I have been pounding this since the day I became a member of the Senate. And perennially, nagsushow ako ng table, nagsushow ako ng mga numero. Now that the National Employment Recovery Strategy Program was launched, I hope that this will be part of it because, for example, if you look at the Department of Education, there are 46,638 unfilled positions. 46,638. This is equivalent actually to 26% of the total unfilled positions in the government. I think the chairman and our colleagues here will agree with me that this is a perfect opportunity for DepEd to have a massive hiring of teachers, of technical personnel, content creators, and audiovisual personnel, which could be vital at this point in time in ensuring quality basic education to our children. No? So my question is, how are we doing? And are there any policy or may policy din tayo pero wala ho ba? Wala pa rin ho kasing improvement, Secretary, no? I'm sorry to say this and in fairness to you ho, I've been saying this for the past 5 years.
We're not prohibiting them from hiring, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. It's just that I think because of the they also have very stringent standards. The minimum qualification requirements might also be high. So that's the reason why they could not hire as many teachers as they want.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry, I will cut you there. No, I may agree with what you said, but granting without admitting that that is the correct reasoning, why don't we adjust?
Mr. Chair, I think that's going to be an internal policy on the part of the hiring departments.
Well, otherwise we will continue to have this problem. Every year we see government agencies reporting thousands of contractual employees. And ako, when I was in TESDA, I remember encountering employees in TESDA 10 years, 12 years na nasa job order pa rin. For example, I just give you another example. No? I hope my staff can show this table. As of August 31 ho, 2020, August 31, 2020, there are 653,816 who are under job orders or contract of service. 653,816. Tinapos ho namin sa Senado yung ending-endo na pasaho namin pero everyone knows what happened there. Kami ni Secretary Carl Chua nagulat din na veto ho, no? But again, every time we talk about this and now we are deliberating about to deliberate a measure doon sa ating committee on the issue of ending-endo. Pero yung private sector, laging sasabihin sa amin, number one violator ay gobyerno. As of August 31, 2020, 653,816 ang job orders. Ayan po yung mga agencies, for example lang ho, no? DPWH has 33,868. Tuloy-tuloy naman ho yung trabaho nila, tuloy-tuloy naman din yung construction. DOH po lalo. Yan ang masakit ho sa lahat. Nasa gitna tayo ng pandemya, meron silang 12,653 job orders and contract of service. Pagkatapos, meron po silang katakot-takot na unfilled positions. Ang question ko lang naman, ma'am, is that wala pa talaga tayong strategy to address this, I think, important concern.
Yun pong sa DOH, mas malaki na po yung ating kini-create na mga contractual positions. Kasi ho, itong job order, ito yung nasa MOOE siya eh. So, nag-create po kami ng contractual positions instead of JO kasi walang security of tenure ito.
Yes.
Kanya lang po, I think ang nakaka-stop po dito sa mga departments na to is that the JOs, although they're knowledgeable of the job, no, and they've been there for a long time, they don't have civil service eligibility. So that's the reason why they cannot be absorbed by the agency. So if you will notice,
Do you have the data, ma'am, as to how many among all this 653,816? Do we have a data to find out ilan po dyan yung walang civil service at yung dahilan, ilan po dyan sa breakdown na yan, yung hindi ma-regularize because wala silang civil service?
We'll have to ask the agencies to report this, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, because this is not part of our government manpower information system. But
I think
yun po,
you
ano
would
yun
also
po,
be interested, just like this representation, you would also be interested kung ano talaga yung reason behind this. Because if we are to talk about job generation, about creating jobs for our people, ang government is the biggest employer of the country. So I think it's important, hindi ho ba?
Yes, Your Honor. By the way, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, the 653 for job order, 500,000 of that comes from LGUs.
Yes,
So
yes.
only 100,000 plus would constitute.
But still, it doesn't, hindi po nagbabago yung numero doon sa unfilled positions, ma'am, yung pinag-usapan ho natin kanina. Hindi ho ba?
Opo, opo.
So we agree, no? We agree na this is important. Dapat kung merong employer na willing mag-regularize, mag-hire, yung biggest employer ho, dapat yung gobyerno. At sana tingnan po natin ito. One last issue that I'd like to one last question, Mr. Chairman, sa DBM din ho, yung creation po ng Department of Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos, at marami po sa amin dito yan, katulad nila Senator Bato, Senator Cayetano, Senator Tolentino, and our chair, Senator Villar also. Lahat po kami authors nitong creation ng Department of Migrant Workers and Overseas. Binanggit kanina ni Secretary Dominguez na they're against creation of departments unless napapakita dito that marami will benefit and it is worth it, no? And siguro dun sa sinabi niya na statement na yun, kasama dito yung Department of Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos, I would assume, dahil ito ay sinertify as priority measure and urgent measure by the President. Ang question ko lang, ma'am, when we prepare this budget, this coming 2022 budget, nasama po ba sa preparation po ninyo itong possibility dahil ito po ay nasa plenaryo na at ilang senators na lang po yung nakalista for interpellation. Nasama po ba yung magiging transition in case maipasa po itong panukalang batas na ito?
Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, the amount is not specifically placed. No? Kumbaga wala pa ho siyang bahay. But the personal services requirement is included under the MPBF. And the other requirements for MOOE in the event that it's going to be carved out from other departments, any incremental cost can be charged against a contingent fund because it will qualify as a contingent fund requirement. Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
That's good to hear, Yusek Tina, no? Just to spread also into the records yung budgets of POEA, OMWA, CFO, PLO, ILAB, NRCO, NMP, ISSO ay malilipat, no, doon sa bagong bahay na ating ipinopropose. And I remember, Ma'am Tina, I recall during the hearing, DBM made mention about the minimum amount needed for the organization of a department, which is 1.109 billion. Yan po yung binigay sa atin, no? But so malaki pa po yung budget. I think more than that yung makukuha natin. But of course, there are incrementals na mangyayari. And just to place on record, ma'am, under your model, yung DBM model na 1 secretary, 4 undersecretaries, 4 assistant secretaries, 7 service level entities, 6 bureau level entities, and 17 regional offices. Sinunod ho namin yun. Ma'am, sinunod po namin yung inyong binanggit. I just want to put that on record and I hope that DBM would also be ready in case matuloy na po itong ating panukala para magtayo ng isang bahay para sa ating mga overseas Filipino workers and overseas Filipinos. Muli, maraming salamat po, Yusek Tina, Secretary Carl, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Villanueva. Vice Chair De La Rosa, just a small point because it's not yet your turn, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. I'm just kidding.
Yes, in conjunction lang doon sa point na ni-raise ni Senator Villanueva, Mr. Chairman, I just would like to get the opinion of Yusek Kanda regarding dito. Parang wala silang preparation kung talagang matuloy itong Department of OFW, migrant workers. Kasi sinasabi na kanina ni Secretary Dominguez na yun nga, ang dapat right-sizing, downsizing in relation to the Mandanas ruling, kailangan ibaba na yung function na yan doon sa i-devolve. Do you think, Yusek Kanda, itong functions that would cater to the needs of our OFW are devolvable, or can they be devolved to the LGUs? Gusto ko lang kunin yung opinion mo, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair,
Yusek Tina, yeah, go ahead.
yes, Mr. Chair, Your Honor. I don't think it is devolvable, for want of a better word. The functions of the new department as proposed do not fall under the Mandanas Garcia ruling because these are locally funded activities that the local governments can absorb. In this case, it is not something that can be absorbed by the local government unit. So I don't think, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, that it will be affected by the Mandanas Garcia ruling.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair De La Rosa. Next is Senior Vice Chair Senator Pia, and then just for the record, after her, Vice Chair Risa Hontiveros. Senator Binay said she'll ask tomorrow, so she'll be next to Senator Drilon in the order tomorrow. And then Vice Chair De La Rosa, Vice Chair Gatchalian, Senator Pangilinan, Vice Chair Poe, Senator Pimentel, Vice Chair Go, Vice Chair Gordon, and then Senator Revilla, just for the record. And we'll suspend the meeting at around 2:45 or as late as we can, so to prepare for session. We'd like to recognize our Senior Vice Chair, Senator Pia. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll go straight to the point. Good afternoon, everyone. So my first question is directed to Secretary Carl Chua, but before that, I have a fairly lengthy background explanation. So Secretary Carl and maybe Secretary Dominguez, if he'd like to add to this later on. So basically, aside from being your Vice Chair, Mr. Chairman, I also chair the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking. And one of our objectives is to mainstream futures thinking in major policy reform. I'm very happy that Secretary Carl, in the past, as soon as he assumed this position as acting secretary, has always mentioned the SDGs and how it should be consistent, how the budget, how agencies should be consistent. So my question to Secretary Carl is, how do we future-proof the budget? How do we ensure that this is the frame of mind of our agencies? Now, for the information of the public that are watching us, my layman's definition of future-proofing is like this. We use strategic foresight to anticipate events and particular future stresses. So that's like COVID. It's a future stress. It was predictable. Future stresses on our system that would mitigate and minimize the impact of these stresses. No? So COVID is a perfect example. Now is the perfect time to think of how do we strategize, how do we use the information we have, the data we have, to minimize the impact of not just COVID, but future stresses. Now, allow me to give my own example, and then you can take it from there, Secretary Carl. In the area of the healthcare system, here we are in a situation where the healthcare workers are overloaded. No less than Secretary Galvez mentioned, I spoke to him yesterday, that the health workers are literally kumbaga sa battle, no? He said battle weary, parang gano'n na hirap na hirap siya, binibisita niya, parang feeling nila wala silang kapalit, and that's why he's a strong proponent of the medical reserve bill. We're doing that. That's on my plate. I'm working on that because we need a steady supply of health workers to come in and assist when we have pandemics such as this. But in the meantime, I have not heard any discussions on the human health resources in general, overall. So Congress passed Doktor para sa Bayan, and we have implemented, we have put in a very strong budget broken down per SUC, per state university and college, wherein we give them a budget so that they can literally and figuratively churn out the doctors of the future. And I said, as the vice chair of the Committee on Finance in charge of the budget of health, that my next project would be to do the same thing for other healthcare professionals, because the doctors cannot work alone. We need the nurses, the medtechs, and so on and so forth. So I do appeal that in the coming budget deliberation, we will find the space to do this, because hindi pwedeng doktor lang ng doktor, diba? They are overworked. They need the whole healthcare professionals to be able to support them. So, and then there's also the CDC bill, and the reason for that is if you look at the United States, do you ever hear their Secretary of Health making a statement? I don't even know who their Secretary of Health is. It's because this pandemic is basically an infectious disease, and that's why they have the CDC heads being their key people. And that's why we need the CDC, because the health secretary needs to work on all the other health issues we have in this country, including the fact that we have a very low immunization rate. And that goes back to my future proofing. Wow, we're trying to address COVID in the best way we possibly can, and yet we are vaccinating our infants. I'm talking about regular vaccines, not COVID. A lot of them below 50%, and we can only have immunity for this against measles, chickenpox, the usual, if it's up to 80%. So in the next few years, we're going to have all these cases of kids, hopefully not dying, but maybe severely sick from all these other ailments. So we are not future-proofing as far as I'm concerned when it comes to the health budget. And I'm very, very concerned about it. I'll go in, but at this point, I'll stop. I'll give Secretary Carl the floor to just ensure I use health as a budget. You can use agriculture. It's the same. Food security. How do we ensure that the agencies are thinking in this way? If we put them, an exercise I heard from a UNDP official was, if we put ourselves into the future, 20 years from now, so the year 2040, what would we ask our 2021, si Senator Angara, baka presidente na by then, baka nga retired president na by then, what would you have told your young 40 plus makisig self what you should have done in this 2021 budget when you are in the year 2041? Yun ang question. Same with you, Secretary Carl. Di ko na alam kung where will you be at that time. Baka naging presidente ka na rin. What would you have told the young Secretary Carl Chua should have been done in 2021? That's my question. Baka
He might say he would have resigned earlier, Senator Pia. He would have resigned from the government earlier. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Sec Carl.
Thank you very much.
That's also my question. What would you have asked yourself?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Senior Vice Chair. Actually, I live day by day, so I will not think about the future. But to answer the question of Senator Pia, clearly, Senator Pia is really the advocate, but I will try to contribute on your question on ensuring that the SDG and the future is incorporated into our budget. May I propose 3 answers? For what we are doing, what we plan to do quickly in the next few months, and what we plan to do over the medium term. As you know, there is now a subcommittee on the SDG under the DBCC, and that is what we are using as the platform to ensure that our SDGs find their way in the budget. So as to the details, I will ask you, Sec Rose, maybe in person or writing, to explain. Number 2, Congress passed the Innovations Act, and we are preparing now our National Innovation Agenda and Strategy. And I think one of the most important areas we have to look at now is really on the area of health. Number 3, I am contemplating how NEDA should prepare the next Philippine Development Plan. And I would like to make it a futures thinking exercise. We have an ambition natin 2040. It is supposed to be achieved in 19 years. I would like to propose that NEDA, DTI, DOST with the scientists and the cutting edge technology in private sector really help us frame this future so that we can make sure that it is in the plan. Normally naman, once we have these strategy documents, this forms part of our budget priorities framework that we share with the DBM. There are also some studies that we are doing on optimal study, costing the social programs in the PDP, budget tagging, no, and foresight exercise, which Senator Pia, if you would like, we can submit in writing some more information, or I can request Yusek Rose to talk more about it at any point. Thank you.
Siguro right now I'll say in writing just because there are a lot of other senators. If there's extra time tomorrow, maybe Mr. Chairman, no, but for now I'm okay. Prepare, be ready na lang tomorrow, and then if ever in writing. So let me proceed. Mr. Chair, just feel free to tell me when my time's up. No, I'll just continue to throw my questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Senator. We'll do that.
Mr. Chairman, my next question is, well, the next statement I want to make, again, thank you for those answers, Secretary Carl. You're very much on point. As I continue our discussion, I'll just drive home some important points. We're talking about future proofing, no? But in the budget of PGH, where in 2021 we were able to provide 1.2 billion. Now the capital outlay is zero. And what I've always been saying in all the budgets, when we're talking about healthcare, I can understand if the congressional insertion was a one-time project, which I already pointed out in my earlier intervention. But something like healthcare, they never run out of need. So I do not understand why we cannot provide that space for them to fill it up with whatever programs or projects that they need, whether it's a one-time, it's a 2-year, it's a 3-year. There should always be that space. Hindi yung parang, okay, nagkaisang Congress, we were able to put this one time, and then next year, wala na naman, no? Kung wala na yun, then that space should still be there for the next project. So, for example, now, with PGH, I suppose this was a long-time need that they have, now becoming urgent, 90 million for fire protection. Guess what? It's not included in the budget. Nasunugan na nga. Diba? Nasunugan na nga. Hindi pa natin naisip na, hindi na nga to foresight eh. It's basic arithmetic. Nasunugan na. At hindi pa rin natin na-upgrade. You know, things like that, I have to discuss this now because when it comes to the health and the education budget, because PGH falls on under education, the DBM the head of DBM, the DBCC team won't be there to hear this. So I have to discuss this now. Diba? This is not even far into the future. This was already rectifying the past. Nasunugan na sila. Okay? Anyway, the total need of PGH at this point is around 500 million. Less than half of what they asked for last year, which, if you ask me, isn't even correct. We should continually be building on it, diba? So the fact that they're only asking for half, another 300 plus million is for equipment, and the 100 million in information system. Digital age, information. Ano ba naman yun, diba? So I'm going to push for this. I know the chairman will be open to the extent na mahahanapan niya ng space, but that's the point I want the DBCC, the whole team, to be aware of. This is not what you call future-proofing, okay? So anyway.
Your Honor, Senator Pia, if I don't fund your amendments, the ghost of my father and my grandparents who were graduates of PGH will come visit me. So Senator Joel as the Higher Education Chairman and UP alumni, I'm sure will help you.
Recipient of PGH care. My mom also.
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the support, no. But this is really intended for the DBCC to hear the concerns that we raise when we're in the details of the budget. Na kailangan sa umpisa pa lang na-address to, so we don't have to go at this level when we're talking about other details. Kasi for me, these are things that should have been addressed. I'll jump now to another example, SUCs, no. Again, future-proofing. Secretary Dominguez is on point. We are not future-proofing when our children are not in school. I don't know what else to say, but we need clear plans. And obviously, primary education is very important. But to simplify things, right now, 18 and above are being vaccinated. 18 and above, most college students because of K to 12 are 18 and above. So can we have a very clear program on the vaccination of all the school personnel? And then what, by October, by November? I mean, I don't even want to wait for next sem. Why can't you already have flexible learning? Flexible learning means pumapasok na sila pa konti-konti, may pwedeng one-on-one with the teachers, small groups, pwede naman yan. So that's part of the future-proofing, Mr. Secretary, that I'd really like. I've had discussion with Secretary Dominguez, so I know his stand on this. No? But Secretary Carl, are you on board with us on this also?
Yes, Senator, Mr. Chair, in fact, I am one of the proponents. You know, I don't really know how it will play out in the school, but my advocacy has always been to pilot, at least pilot in the least risky area so that we learn and know what to expect and what to do. So I'm continuously looking at the evidence. In fact, there is a recent study in India wherein they also closed school for a long time, where the evaluation shows significant scarring in their children. So I think after this Delta spike, we will propose again the pilot. Thank you.
And on that note, I know it is often, I often hear that we will pilot in the least risky areas. I understand that, obviously, no. But please take note, no, there may be cities, and I have not had an in-depth discussion with my brother, Taguig City Mayor, but I do know that he is in in-depth discussion with the international schools and other private schools in Taguig City. So you may also want to ask them because they may have mechanisms and processes in place, no, especially the private schools. Yeah, so let me just end it there, no, that maybe you might want to also include not necessarily the least infectious areas, but even the most prepared, because then they can counter the infection that way. That's basically the approach that Secretary Dominguez mentioned, no, that we open up, but then we put all the health standards in place. So there. A few other key points that I'd really like to run through. PhilHealth, Mr. President, we're bleeding. We know already that the entire healthcare system is integrated into PhilHealth. Now, years ago, and we've come a long way. I'm very proud of what we've achieved, but I'm also very disappointed in where we are now. Years ago, we could barely cover hospitalization because it was really on a shared payment scheme. Now, PhilHealth covers a lot, and so there's so much progress that we've made. However, with all the problems we're having in PhilHealth and now with the private hospitals not getting paid, we're really in a bad situation. So I take note that the governance, the Governance Commission for GOCCs has the authority to look into every GOCC. They can recommend strategies. They can even call for its abolition. And in 2020, there was a task force set up to do this. But here we are. The president of PhilHealth, Attorney Giran, who everybody has very high regards for, was put there to find out ano yung kalokohan dun sa mga payments na hindi naman bogus payments, no, to bogus health services. And obviously he what's the word I'm looking for? He used his time and energy on that. On the other hand, wala na silang binayaran. So the outcome of this investigation on too much to paying hospitals that didn't deserve to get paid, the net effect was hindi na sila nagbayad, and that's not what we want. So I toss this back to the economic team, who I'm pretty sure works closely with the GCG. What are we going to do? I hope before the next administration we can at least fix this, because I hate it when I hear talks of abolishing PhilHealth. That's not the response, no? The correct response there is to managing it correctly. So I don't know who'd like to respond to that. I mean, at least to acknowledge that we're going to look into this at some level, because otherwise there's no future for healthcare if we don't solve this.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, with the permission of Senator Pia. Senator Nancy?
Yeah, with the permission of Senator Pia. Siguro I'd just like to add di ba yung mga members din ng DBCC, most of them are members of the PhilHealth Board, Senpia.
That's a good point. Yeah,
They can already address this issue.
that's a very good point. Yeah.
Yun lang, Mr. Chairman.
If there's no one who's
Thank you.
ready to answer right now, is there, Mr. Chairman?
The question is, what's going to be done about the
Yeah, what's going to be done?
backlog in
There's no
PhilHealth? Is that the question, Your Honor?
Exactly.
Sec Carl, would you like to weigh in on this issue, or Sec Sani, or I don't know if Governor Ben is probably he's not a member of PhilHealth Board. Malayo na yun sa banking and monetary policy. Yusek Kanda, anyone want to weigh in on the issue raised by Senator Pia about PhilHealth reform? It's a very important issue, actually. It's directly linked. These issues are all linked, you know. Yung issues sa benefits ng health workers is linked to the delay in the payments of the reimbursables of the hospitals. No?
Yeah, and the very survival of our healthcare system, because a lot of the small hospitals, which are an integral part of the healthcare system, cannot survive on pautang na without even any assurance of getting paid.
That's right. The credit calls are coming in.
Maybe we can, I think Secretary Dominguez stepped away. Maybe we can just get an answer later on, so I can just continue.
Sec Carl, could you and Sec Sani maybe talk about, there he's there. Sec Sani, I don't know if you heard the question of Vice Chair Pia regarding PhilHealth reform. Basically, she's asking, is there anything in the works regarding efforts to speed up the payments to PhilHealth, with of course with the proper vetting of the claims and no bogus claims, etc. But given the current pandemic, what can be done?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Senator Cayetano, the President has already ordered the speeding up of the payments, okay? But, you know, PhilHealth has a real serious problem with their system, okay? The first problem is that it is not digitized. It's not computerized. So it's rather difficult. And I've attended some board meetings, and one of the board meetings just arguing about whether or not we should spend 2 billion pesos in the computer system. And there was a lot of objection, and I was telling them, what the heck? You're spending over 100 billion a year. What's 2 billion to have a good system? Oh, you know, it's not sure. You know, this is a sweetheart contract. Well, I don't know, okay? But don't object to spending the money for improving the system so that payments can be made, so that claims can be vetted quickly. So it's a systemic, it's a serious systemic problem, which I think cannot be fixed with a wave of a magic wand, okay? So they're struggling and they're trying their best to do it. But really, fundamentally, in the future, we will really face a serious problem. And that problem is the fact that the collections are going to be lower than the payouts in a few years. And the capital will be quickly depleted. We have to really think about how to recapitalize PhilHealth, or else how to probably rationalize the amounts provided. As you know, because of the COVID situation and the employment, its impact on employment, you had a drop in revenues. At the same time, you have an increase in expenditures. So a real long-term plan has to be put in place to return PhilHealth to a sustainable basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Does that satisfy you, Vice Chair Pia? By the way, you can ask one last question, Vice Chair, or wrap up
Thank you.
with a few more questions.
Yeah, well, definitely I'll need more details. I'd like to sit down with the secretaries later on this, because I'd like to assist in how we can solve this. I just don't want to pass it into the future, because I do recognize it's a very difficult problem.
Yeah.
My last two questions, I think
I think you'll be chairing the health budget hearing, so you can take it up then in greater detail, Your Honor.
but I mean, I kind of prefer that if we can have a meeting on it, so that at least when
Sure.
when other colleagues ask me questions on it, I'm more prepared with the responses. So
Sure.
my last two questions, very quickly. Secretary Carl, you mentioned targeted ayuda. So do you know how you intend to do that and how you will roll it out? And second question is, last question is on one of the priority measures in the LEDAC is the Virology Center. Senator Nancy Binay and I are both quite critical about this. Again, in terms of rationalizing expenses, we do not understand that at this time, why do we have to prioritize a virology center when there is the RITM that is not even receiving the funding that it needs? And the virology center, for all intents and purposes, is quite similar. During the LEDAC, Congressman Joey Salceda, who I believe is a proponent of the Virology Center, was explaining that they will also be able to test and create antiviral medicines on animals, but that can also be done in RITM. So not a lengthy discussion. This can happen in my committee. I'm just posting it here for the overall picture, because that will require a very big chunk of our budget that could be spread out in our other healthcare needs. It's a solution that we can already adopt if it can be resolved, so that we don't have to keep forcing this virology center when there's another agency that is very capable of doing the job and their other health needs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time. Thank you to Secretary Dominguez, Secretary Carl, and to the rest of our DBCC team here.
Thank you very much. Very important concerns, and we hope to follow up on those. ComSec, please follow up on the requests of Senator Pia and the promised documents from the agencies. Hopefully by tomorrow we can all receive those. Yes, Secretary Sani, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman,
Yes, Your Honor.
we are ready to respond, Mr. Chairman, to the questions of Senator Ping Lacson. Should we do it now or tomorrow? Or
Maybe when he's
whenever?
around. I don't think he's around anymore, Sexani.
Okay.
Is that all right? Tomorrow na lang siguro.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you very
When
much.
he's around. Thanks. Thank you. That's very prompt of you. Next is Vice Chair Risa Ontiveros. Ma'am, you have the floor. Afternoon.
Good afternoon at salamat, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I'll just start by, reacting that kung tulad nung sinabi ni Sec Carl kanina na pre-Delta yung assumptions nitong proposed budget. Then I would say, Mr. Chairman, return to sender. Kasi parang futile na mag-usap. If, as the chairman said, this is a budget in a way from the old world, we're in the new post-Delta or Delta world already. So, but still posing my questions.
That might be like doing a U-turn with the Titanic,
Oh my
Sen.
gosh,
Risa.
Okay, short of doing a U-turn with the Titanic, pero may pagka redirection din now that the good chairman mentions it. Kaya ko sinabi kanina sa simula na return to sender, as has been observed by some of our colleagues, there are no budgets for the risk allowances of health workers, no budgets additionally to accommodate the new poor into an expanded DSWD 4-piece program based on Listahanan 3, no budgets to help PUV operators to break even as we continue physical distancing. As mentioned also earlier, no budgets for the third vaccine dose, and hardly also any budget for contact tracing. Additionally, no contingency funds in the COMELEC for the possibility of elections that might be held over longer voting hours. So this budget is disconnected from the reality of the pandemic. which the DOH itself said during the House hearings will still be with us for 1 or even at least 2 more years. So, yung sense nung pagkasabi ko, Mr. Chairman, ng return to sender, short of U-turning the Titanic, is Malacanang has to send an amendment and an addendum to the 2022 budget that it sent to Congress just to sustain the level of relief and response at a high level. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, before I go into my first question about this possible return to sender, with some colleagues, I believe that Malacanang has to reduce some agency budgets, such as those for NTF-LCAC, for infrastructure budgets that need to be reduced. Perhaps the DBM merely has to ensure that there are multi-year obligation authorities, or MAYOA, one of the good instruments invented by the DBM. MAYOA that will finance the connective network infrastructure that will expand the reach of build transport nodes that will be finished soon. So to my first question, Mr. Chair, about the return to sender, could I ask Sec Kanda, am I right, Sec Kanda, that the President can indeed amend his own 2022 budget submission to Congress? Tama po ba ako doon, Sec Kanda?
Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, I don't think it has ever happened that we amended the submission of the President's budget to the Senate or Congress. So,
Okay. But the President himself, no one else, but the President himself to amend it, though it has never happened, as the DBM tells us, is there a law that prohibits this?
there is no law that I know of, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. It's just that we have a constitutional deadline to submit the budget and the budget of expenditure and sources of financing within 4 weeks of 30 days from the opening of the Congress in the fourth Monday of July. So that's the compliance that we did, compliance dates. But we've never had the chance to, in my long years in government, we've never had an instance where the President provides an amendment to his past submission. None that I remember, Mr. Chair.
Opo. And as you said, you're under a constitutional obligation and you have met it. The executive has met it. And sabi nyo rin naman, there is no law that prohibits it. Since pasok na yung submission within the required time, hindi kaya na there is time, since it is not disallowed, it is not prohibited, there is time for the President to submit something in the way of yung adjustments na sinabi nyo kanina, DBM is open to, para maging circa Delta era yung proposed budget natin.
I think we've submitted the budget, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman. So we really leave it we leave the budget, the fate of the budget in the hands of the legislature, which after all has the power of the purse. So whatever the budget looks like in the implementation, we'll just honor whatever changes there are.
All right, Sekanda, I'll leave that.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll leave it at that for now, Sekanda. So moving forward, I have here a set, Mr. Chairman, of four interrelated questions that I'll address to the members of the DOF and DBM in one go. And then finally, I'll have a short question for Sec Carl. So first, Mr. Chairman, it would appear sa ngayon that the economic managers believe there's no more room in the GAA for the 405 billion peso Bayanihan 3 proposal of the House of Representatives, nor maybe even for the smaller 300B version of our colleague Sen Manny. So first question on this, Mr. Chairman, kay Sec Dominguez, could the good secretary state what would, if anything, what would lead him to ask Malacanang to certify kahit na some version of a Bayanihan 3 as urgent?
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Go ahead,
Yes,
Secretary.
please.
The problem that we have with additional expenditure at this time is that our expected fiscal deficit this year is already at 9.3% of GDP. That is extremely high. I will definitely make a recommendation for the approval of additional spending, as you would call it, Bayanihan 3, if we could find the counterpart funding that will make the expenditure as close to fiscally neutral as possible. And at this point in time, although our tax collections are healthy, although our inflows from the dividends of our GOCCs are healthy, they are still insufficient to fund even the amount of 175 billion, which we have determined would be appropriate for funding the mitigation of hunger among our citizens. So this is we've been working at this for the last 6 or 7 months, but the revenues to make it fiscally neutral are just not there at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. So, pero at least, given the condition you laid out, finding counterpart funding that would still be fiscally neutral in its effect. Therefore, Bayanihan 3 is not totally out of the question as far as the OF is concerned.
No,
Given
it's
that-
not. It's not out of the question. In fact, we have expressed this to members of the House in several meetings. Even, in fact, last night, I mentioned it again to the Speaker of the House. Thank you, ma'am.
Salamat, Secretary, Mr. Chairman. So I'll get, actually, my next 3 questions happen to be related dun sa ni-raise ni Secretary na...
With your indulgence, Vice Chair Risa,
Yes,
on
Mr.
that
Chairman.
on the point if that Sexani mentioned, what about the proceeds from the Pogo tax, Sexani?
Good point, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it hasn't been collected yet.
If we assuming we pass that, would you be willing to earmark that for stimulus?
Of course.
Okay,
Yes.
that's great.
The answer is
Thank
yes,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Sexani.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. I hope nakikinig ang PAGCOR kasi nanawagan na ako sa kanila ulit, Mr. Chair, na kolektahin na yung 1.36B na yan. Idagdag sa ating COVID-19 response
And Joel is
fund.
also nodding his head
Yes.
because
Yes, our Chair of Labor.
Yes, thank you.
brought
Thank
that
you also to
issue to light.
Secretary Dominguez. Thank you.
Salamat, Mr. Chairman. Salamat, Sen. Joel. So, ayun, just before I get to my 3 questions related dun sa possible counterpart funding na binanggit ni Sec. Dominguez. Because, Mr. Chair, I really believe that matter of Bayanihan 3 needs to be settled as soon as possible. Hopefully today, if that is possible, so that we can get a clear sense of the magnitude of the changes to the proposed GAA 2022 that might be in order. So, second po, ito related na nga dun sa counterpart funding. And I raised it as an interjection kanina earlier in our hearing. So on the other hand, there are still large sums of infrastructure funds sponsored by Congress during last year's budget deliberations that remain unobligated. And of course, as mentioned also by some of our colleagues, I'm referring to the projects that the President's veto message marked as for later release or FLR. Can the DBM provide us today with the status of and prospects for these projects? Specifically po, how much are the 4 later release funds in GAA 2020 and then in GAA 2021? And how much of each of these have already been obligated?
Yusek Tina, I think that's addressed to you.
Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, the for later release amount is 193 billion pesos. And of this
It's for GAA 2020, ma'am, or 2021?
2021, ma'am.
2021 po.
2021, opo.
2020, magkano po yun?
Ang 2020, halos wala na, ma'am, kasi that was the amount captured for the ayuda that was provided. So there
How much
is
is that po?
Yes, for 2021, it's 193 billion pesos. The breakdown of
Ma'am,
which
just for the record, magkano mo po yung noong 2020 na ginamit na lang natin sa ayuda?
Yun sa ayuda, ma'am, we use 13.9, if I'm not mistaken, 13.9 billion.
From the
Tapos,
FLR of 2020.
over and above ba to sa 13? Yun hong unreleased, if I may correct, no, the 13.9 corresponds to the unobligated. So this one, the amount I'm going to provide you is the amount of unreleased for 2020. And it is 18.4 billion pesos.
Okay po.
Opo.
Thank you. And then for 2021, it's 193B.
193. We have, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, a breakdown of the amounts by department or by category, if you would like me to enumerate. The AFP modernization program is 4 billion. DPWH, 117.7 billion. DOTR has 13 billion. State universities and colleges has 3.3 billion, and the Bureau of Fire Protection 2 billion pesos. That's AGF to.
Ito po yung mga obligated na, ma'am.
No. Ma'am, ito po yung mga for later release po ito.
FLR pa. Okay po.
Opo.
And then, ma'am, you're surely in touch with the DPWH, the SUCs, yung ibang ahensya po na in-enumerate ninyo that are working to submit the prerequisites. So, yung detailed designs, right-of-way acquisition work plans, at iba pa. What are the most common project readiness indicators that are not being submitted?
Usually, Mr. Chairman, Madam Senator, it's usually the targets and the actual accomplishment, financial as well as physical. That's where they take some time in completing. Also for the details, although we're not very strict as far as construction details are concerned, a certification sometimes would suffice, or not sometimes, a certification as to the readiness of the implementors would suffice to cover this.
All right. And in addition to these indicators, could you provide the committee with some numbers, and also explain to us just a bit more the other prerequisites in the DBM's checklist of implementation readiness indicators?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Madam Senator, it is included in our fund release circular, but we will provide the committee with these details.
Thank you, Yusek. Mr. Chair, I'm only interested in the overall picture. If DBM provides the committee, as the good Yusek promises, provides us with the information through the chair on the proportion of projects and their budgets that are still not implementation ready, hindi pa implementation ready. Now that we are way into the rainy season, ito nga Mr. Chair, umuulan sa labas ng bintana ko, then this should provide the legislature a sense precisely of the possible sources of financing also for Bayanihan 3 out of, I thought originally out also of GAA 2020, but also out of GAA 2021. And this is where I relate it dun sa sinabi ni Sec Dominguez kanina na possible counterpart funding na magiging fiscally neutral ang effect overall. So yes, you said Kanda. So I must therefore ask, just to think aloud with you po, if we set October 1, 2021, for instance, as a cutoff date, ano po, and given the pace at which the implementing agencies and DBM are able to submit SARO requests to Malacanang for those FLR projects, how much of these FLR projects will remain unobligated by October 1?
Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, I don't think we're in a position to be able to answer that because this is implementation already on the part of the agencies. And usually the responsibility of DBM ends when we actually release the amount and then they provide us with the accomplishments or the reports on how they utilize the funds. But as to implementation,
Maybe just just the data you gave us a while ago.
Yes, Your Honor, we can
According
provide
to
it.
Vice Chair Risa, she's only interested in the general picture, and then maybe we can drill down as we hear the different agencies. We can
Yes,
drill
Your
down
Honor,
on those
Mr. Chair. Okay, we will
figures.
provide the general requirements.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. Is that
Yusek, and
okay,
thank you very much, Mr.
Vice
Chair.
Chair Risa?
Very okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. Salamat po.
Thank you. Salamat. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Pero wala kayong ballpark figure in mind, Yusek Kanda, since kayo naman yung nakikipagtrabaho dito sa iba't ibang agency with whom we will drill down during the agency budget hearings, na magkano kaya yung unobligated, say kung by October 1?
We can provide you, ma'am, an estimate based on the unobligated of the for later release or unobligated. Unobligated based
October 1. Opo. So
If
it's
it
like a
is
projection. Opo.
If it is unobligated for those amounts released, we can provide that based on an estimate on the last quarter. But if it is
Sige,
unobligated for the amounts that are still to be released, we cannot make that estimate, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman.
Yung kaya nyo lang pong
Opo, meron po kami na.
subukang i-sketch in broad strokes para sa komite. If you could kindly through our chair. Appreciated, ma'am. So, salamat po ng marami. So, my last point, Mr. Chair, is addressed to Sec Carl. Carl, during the hearings at the CA where we supported the good secretary's appointment as head of NEDA, I argued then that it was, well, probably a no-brainer to expand the 4-piece program so that those families that have become poor, as well as those who remain unemployed, can be included in the 4-piece program. Well, the nice thing about this 4-piece program is that there was a recent updating of the list of the poor via Listahanan 3 nga po, and the 2021 budgets of the program can simply be augmented even if there is no Bayanihan 3. Additional info lang, Sec Carl, that I'm sure we both find important about the 4-piece. Wala po kasing binabanggit na additional na beneficiaries sa ngayon. Mas binawasan pa nga from around 5.08 million households dahil mayroong na daw nag-graduate na. So, 4.295 million households na lang ang natitira as of June 2020. So last year yet, PIDS, as early as last year, estimated that there would be an additional 1.5 million poor households just because of the 2020 lockdowns and and underemployment. So sa halip, sabi ng PIDS noon, madadagdagan tayo ng 1.5 million households by the time of these budget debates, pero ang nangyari actually ay nabawasan siya ng mga 800,000 sa 4-piece beneficiary. So, Sec Carl, if the Secretary has, as I believe he has already read the evaluations of the 4-piece program, as he promised he would, and given, Sec, your detailed understanding of the misery, the hunger, and also the likelihood of quick income recovery, say in the next 36 months, so yung medyo yung itatagal pa ng pandemya, no, 1 to 3 years, could you, Sec Carl, share your initial assessment of the role that an expanded four-piece program could play so that families will not permanently slide into poverty, and so that economic demand can also be stimulated via an expanded four-piece program.
Thank you, Senator Pia. Mr. Chair, maybe I will summarize my...
Si Pia yung
Senator Risa,
kapatid
I'm
ko.
very sorry. I haven't eaten lunch. Sorry, my brain is
Oh
not.
my God.
Sorry. Let me
Kainin
answer,
ka
Senator
namin
Risa. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. It often
Apo.
happens with me and my sister.
Yes, the evaluation report of PIDS, I think we have read both of us have read it, and they do recommend that the program has been effective, more on education but less on health. Number two, my other concern, because I have also looked at this matter, is the exit strategy, because we do not want the households to be dependent on this subsidy for K to 12 years, no, for 13 years. So I will look at that and look at the experience of other countries. I know in other countries, because of my previous work in World Bank, my problem is the exit strategy. Number three, this year we are doing the 2021 Family Income and Expenditure Survey. Once the data is out, I will take a look quickly to see what is the impact, because I understand this year, my pandemic, we may have more poor, but I will look at the profile so that I can make a recommendation. But clearly, so far, the evaluation reports have shown that it is one of the better programs. Now, as to whether we put money, we have to look at the magnitude of poverty and look at the exit strategy din. Salamat po.
Salamat din po, Sec Carl. So, sige po, intayin pa namin ng konti pa after you've read the evaluations. Kasi I've been waiting also with bated breath since yung ating deliberations sa CA. But I'm glad na na-appreciate nyo yung benefit ng 4P sa education outcomes ng mga enrolled families. I'm surprised that you have an assessment that's not so satisfactory about the health, samantalang di ba yun yung isang conditionality. So at least in terms of maternal and infant health, it should show improvements. As for the exit strategy, that's very fair, pero yung mismo sigurong pagbawas ng 800,000 households sa mga 4Ps beneficiaries should already show a healthy cohort in the exit strategy. And not to forget po, Sec Carl, yung binanggit ko rin sa inyo nung CA hearing natin na proven na nga na yung mga anak ng mga 4Ps families ay ilang batch na nagtapos sa high schools, many of them graduating as valedictorian, salutatorian, at yun na nga po ay nag-aaral na sa mga SUCs natin. I welcome your continued study of best practices in other countries na alam nyo naman po, doon din po natin hinanguan ng ilang mga ideya para sa ating sariling 4Ps. And lastly po, Sec Carl, we'll await any discussion paper that you could submit to the committee through our chair after you have comprehensively evaluated the 4Ps and can submit your recommendation to us. But as you know, I really believe I agree with you, it's one of the better programs, and sinasabi natin, di ba, we shouldn't throw good money after bad. Pero if there's a good program and we've invested good money in it, then tingin ko, common sense din that we throw or put more good money into it. So maraming salamat, Sec Carl. At maraming salamat din po, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Risa Montevera, Senator Risa. We apologize to our resource persons because in a physical hearing, we would be able to provide lunch. But I've lunched on nuts and fruit juice. But we apologize again. No, we're not human rights violators here. But given these circumstances, we have a few minutes left for the next interpellator. That's our newest vice chair, our breastfeeding advocate, Vice Chair Bato de la Rosa, Senator Bato de la Rosa. Sir, just you have till 2:55 approximately. It's 2:47 on my chart. Please go ahead, sir.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. One question lang ang sa akin.
Yes, sir.
Para kay Secretary Dominguez, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead,
Sir,
please, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Secretary Dominguez, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sir. In your presentation, sir, it was shown that nagdoble yung collection ng GOCCs from kinumpare mo yung Aquino administration, the 6 years of Aquino administration from 2010 to 2016. 6 years, ang collection was only 164 billion. As compared to the Duterte administration, 4 years lang, from 2016 to 2020, the GOCC remittances amounted to 317. So almost nagdoble. May I know from you what were the measures instituted by this government that resulted to the increase of almost 100% in the collection from the GOCCs?
Thank you
Yun lang,
very
sir, ang
much.
tanong ko.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, Senator De La Rosa, there were essentially two things that happened. The first was that we have a very good corporate affairs group headed by Undersecretary Chongko and Assistant Secretary Cruz, and they were very efficient in monitoring the performance of the GOCCs, helping them improve it, and being very diligent in collecting the 50% due to the government, to the treasury, due to them 50% of the profits as provided by law. So it's a matter of diligence. It's a matter of persuasion, and in some sense, not listening to reason from the GOCCs. So that's number one. Number two, the Bayanihan law also allowed us to do a cash sweep last year. Kaya we were able to do the cash sweep and increase talaga the collections from the GOCCs. And I must say, they did it in general voluntarily. It's as you know, persuasion is very important in our business. And as they say, if you have them by the shorts and curlies, their minds and hearts will follow. Thank you.
Yes, sir. With all due respect to the GOCC, sir, no? Masasabi ba natin that the anti-corruption drive of our president is working along this line? May epekto kaya, sir?
Yeah, thank you. Their profits also increased. And because of that, their profits increased. And I would say there's better management and less leakage. I do not say there's graft and corruption, but there is most likely less leakage there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Maraming salamat, sir. Yun lang, Mr. Chairman, ang tanong ko. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair.
Salamat, Vice Chair De La Rosa. Sen Nancy, you're asking tomorrow na lang, no?
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I just request from DBM if they can submit either later or early tomorrow before the start of the hearing, total number of free testing, kung magkano yung the budget for this year for free testing, and yung same din na hinihingi ni Senator Ralph kanina for next year's budget, ilan yung makaka-avail ng free testing?
All right. Can we request that from any of the agencies who have the information? Next, actually, it's 2:52. Next is our Vice Chair, Senator Gatchalian. But the bad news, Senator Gatchalian, we only have till 2:55 because we have our Senate plenary. Would you like to start your questioning or do it tomorrow?
Ang
Maybe we
haba kasi
can-
ng tanong ho ni Senator De La Rosa eh. Sobrang haba. Kaya no, but,
Isa lang nga.
with your indulgence, Chairman, may I just take my turn tomorrow?
Certainly, sir. Tomorrow ka na lang, Vice Chair.
Yeah, because
Bukas
we
ka na
only
lang.
have less than 5 minutes.
nagkakagulo yung PDP sa Bulacan today. Nagkakagulo sila today.
Is that the chief's list?
Nice to be getting real-time updates from our colleague. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Gatchalian. I think the order tomorrow is to repeat is the Minority Leader, then Senator Binay, then Senator Kiko, then yourself, Vice Chair. And then we'll continue down the line with our other colleagues, namely Senator Poe, Vice Chair Grace Poe, Senator Pimentel, Vice Chair Go, Vice Chair Gordon, and Senator Revilla. So, with your
Mr. Chairman,
of our,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Senator Nancy.
para hindi magutom si Secretary Carl bukas, we accept food
We will
delivery.
have a lunch break. We will have a lunch break tomorrow.
We accept food delivery, ha?
Yeah, my apologies again to our resource persons. No, normally by lunch, but given the circumstances, thank you. We thank our very good officials for not only for minding the economic ship of state, but also for patiently answering our questions today. So to Secretary Sani, Secretary Carl, Yusek Tina, and their teams, and Governor Ben, thank you very much for all you're doing. And we'll suspend the meeting in the meantime. Thank you to our colleagues, especially those who've been with us since 9 o'clock and are still here. Our vice chairs, Senator Nancy, Vice Chair Lisa, Senator Poe has been here. Vice Chair Win, Vice Chair Poe have been here. Vice Chair Marcos is one of the earliest also. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow, guys, and see you in the plenary. Salamat. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honors.